Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, December 11th, 2018 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board. May we have the roll call, please?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Member Marsh? Here. Member Kaiser? Here. Member Dixon?
Present.
Member Lavoie?
Here.
Member Hayes?
Here.
Member Burkett?
Here.
Chair Johns?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And while you're at the mic, please report on the posting of the agenda.
The agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of Council Chambers and the Planning Department counter on Thursday in accordance with state law.
All right, thank you very much. Acceptance of the agenda. Board, are there any amendments or changes to the agenda as it is printed this morning, as presented to us this morning?
Move to approve as presented.
Second from Mr. Lavoie. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, the following time has been set aside for public comment. If you would like to address the board on any item today, on or not on the agenda, now would be the time to do it. We have no public hearings this morning, so if you are here to address the board on any issue, now would be the time to do so. So I will officially open the public comment and welcome any members of the audience to come forward. I think now is the time. Sure, please. Welcome.
Yeah. This is the applicant on the restaurant application and your application for HSBB 55.
4B?
Yep.
Yeah?
So, Mario, if you want to have him speak at the time of that item, even though it's not a public hearing, we can do it that way, whichever way you feel.
Mario, it's entirely up to you. You want to wait until the item is on the agenda? I imagine there's a presentation. I think
you may have questions at that
yes,
point.
excellent. All right, thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address us this morning during public comment? All right, seeing none, we will close the public comment. The consent calendar, we're going to look at the approval of the minutes, and we have both October 9th, 2018 and November 13th, 2018. Let's look at the October meetings minutes first. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the October 9th minutes? All right, any comments, concerns? Mr. Marsh, please.
On page 3, where halfway down where it says Member Marsh, it should be the National Register criteria in the ordinance.
Yep. Thank you.
Dick, please.
And right under that, in his, it should be Burkett asked the status of the orchid tree, otherwise it's confusing whether it was Marsh or whether it was
I'm not.
Burkett.
Dick, draw Ken's attention to what...
At the second to the last one. No. Which one?
Right under what, it's on page 3
Yep.
again, and Vincent just mentioned about a member
The one
Marsh,
about
right under
the-
that Burkett about the status of the orchid tree, instead of he.
On page 3.
Right.
Which paragraph?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
That was the one.
See, mine is the same as yours.
Mine's different. Oh,
Oh, because you're, this is page 3. So you're on page 5.
yeah,
Page 5.
yeah, page 5. Sorry.
Do you have that, Ken?
Okay, so where it says he asked, it should say Member Burkett
Yeah,
asked.
right.
Okay, I'm with you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
I will be abstaining since I did not attend that meeting.
All right, Linda, thank you. Anybody else?
I missed that meeting as well.
Abstaining?
Yes.
Okay, Dan, thank you. I want to just make a comment. On page 2, under new business, Chair Johns asked staff to clarify earlier discussions of incorporating the scope of uncovering the front building column enclosures as part of this or upcoming capital projects involving the front facade, and that is the front facade of the airport.
Yep.
No edits to it. I'm only mentioning it because I will be bringing it up later during board member comments.
Good.
All right, thank you. Bringing everyone's attention to that. Any further discussion on the minutes to the meeting? I'll accept a motion, please.
Second?
Lavoy and Marsh. Any further discussion on the minutes of October 9th? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Let's now look at, please, the minutes to November the 13th. Has everyone had an opportunity? They were quite extensive minutes. Thank you, staff, for that. Dick, please.
Yes, on page 2, coming down 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down. I just think it would be good, it's just, Director Fag noted the ordinance. I think we should just say which ordinance it was, and
Got
we're
it.
sure we're fine with the nomination. And then on page number 6, under the 3rd paragraph, the vote on that was actually 6-1, rather than 7-0.
Who was the one?
Me.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Anything else on the minutes to the meetings of November? Again, I will note, please, the discussion, public hearing 2A, Peter Laforte and Sally Julian. Nothing to change in the minutes, but I will be bringing a discussion up about that during my board member comments at the end of the meeting.
Good.
Just drawing everyone's attention to that item in our minutes. 1 second, please, everyone. Okay, any further discussion or comments, edits to the minutes of the meeting? Vincent?
Yeah, on page 8 of 9, halfway down, under Chair Johns, it should say, as a commercial site or structure.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Vincent, because I did miss on page 8 of 9. Again, it is just a minutes notation. Chair Johns requested the park and letter to the mayor be on the December agenda, so hopefully we will have something relative to that today.
And this should be the park letter, not the park and letter.
Yes, thank you. And we can talk about that during, anything else? Motion, please?
Move to approve with changes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Item number 2 on the, we have public hearings. We have no public hearings today. And number 3 on the agenda, unfinished business, and we have no unfinished business. So we will move right to item number 4, new business. Stephen and Nancy Cooper, owners, requesting Class 1 Historic Site designation of the Walter Kirshner residence, also known as the Casa Adair, located at 417 West Hermosa Place, zoned R1A, case number HSPB number 112. Ken?
And this matter is in your packet. You have the historic resource agenda that was submitted as part of the application. And what we would ask at this time is that you direct the board to, or you direct staff to schedule the hearings and to schedule the site visit for that project.
All right, excellent. Any questions? We have staff's direction.
Just a comment.
Linda?
Terrific report.
It's extensive
Very
Yeah.
extensive.
and an interesting property.
Mr. Lavoy?
Miss, it's perhaps too interesting a report. There seems to be a lot of what, to me, seems to be extraneous information. The whole discussion of the involvement with Welton Beckett is unnecessary to this building. All of the other projects, other than a list, would have been sufficient. There is perhaps lacking a description or a picture of what the front of the house looked like before 1983, and what that elevation of the house looked like before 1983, and perhaps a discussion about the unfortunate implications of what was changed to both the site and the house
With that revision.
with that revision.
In other words, you're requesting more narrative on those particular items?
Yes,
And
uh-huh.
requesting if we can get a
Both,
front
both,
facade
both, both
elevation?
narrative and any documentation. It's otherwise very thorough, but that's lacking, and those elements need to be very clearly identified as non-contributing.
And staff, I would like to ask that that the minutes do reflect Mr. Lavoie's comments. In the past several months, we've been looking at an expedited, an abbreviated application, and you know, Margaret Mitchell might well have penned this. I mean, it is akin to Gone with the Wind.
Very
And
interesting.
it is. No, there's no question that it's interesting, but I appreciate Bill's comments that there was some extraneous information that maybe wasn't as salient to the nomination as some of the other items that he brought up. So just that the minutes should reflect that. So staff, our recommendation board, our recommendation is to accept the historic resource report and direct staff to schedule site visits for board members and a notice public hearing for the board to consider the application. I think
Is that a motion?
I just made it,
Sounds like a
apparently. Yes, it sure did sound like
I'll
one.
second it.
Yes, all right, excellent. Curiously, I don't expect that these site visits will occur before the end of this year.
I don't think so. It's going to depend on everyone's availability.
Okay.
We'll certainly try.
So on a technicality, does my term end here today officially or at the end of the year?
I honestly don't know that technical detail, but I
Okay.
can find out.
Well, only in that if these site visits were scheduled prior to the end of this year, and my term was through the end of the year, I'd very much like to go on this site visit,
Fair enough.
all right? And,
But you also want to know that detail in terms of other
well, just,
activities that you're looking at.
I don't know what else,
so-
might apply to, but,
Have
yeah.
you had any conversations with the city clerk at all?
I have not,
Okay,
no,
I'll
I
find
haven't.
out.
But, and this is really,
Juicy one.
yeah,
And even after the first of the year, you might tag along as one of our assistants.
all right, well, thank you. All right, so I'm sorry, we made a motion, we had a second, and did we vote on that?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Anyone opposed? No. All right, excellent.
you.
All right, under new business, item number 4B. This is a certificate of approval request by Gonzalez Hospitality Group LLC on behalf of Brandenburg Oasis Plaza LLC, owner, for exterior alterations at the Oasis Commercial Building, a Class 1 historic site located at 101 through 121 South Palm Canyon Drive, zoned CBD. Historic Site Preservation Board number 55. Staff report, please, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in your staff report, this is a tenant improvement project requesting alterations to the exterior of the Oasis Commercial Building. The tenant space that's being occupied is the space that was formerly a Starbucks restaurant, the outdoor patio of the Starbucks restaurant, and a portion of the outdoor patio that previously had been, fenced off. I don't think it was ever used by a adjacent restaurant tenant, Gioro that is now vacated. The staff report analyzes this particular application in the context of what we have as far as the building's original footprint and the original conditions at that front patio. We've noted that the past railing modifications that have been done by approval of the HSPB. However, we're noting that those railings that went in, particularly the Gioro railing, are very noticeable, and they're very much affecting the visual appearance of the open plaza condition that used to be on the first floor of the Oasis Commercial Building. In looking at the applications, and what you'll see in the back of your report, there are both fixtures, furnishings, and equipment that's been proposed here, as well as modifications involving the railing and the installation of a stucco archway that will signify the entrance into the outdoor patio, as well as a replacement of the pair of double doors that happen at the corner of the building that used to be the front doors into Starbucks. Those doors are apparently worn out, and the applicant is proposing to replace those doors with doors that are of a similar mill finish natural aluminum. The staff report looked at these in terms of the type of railing that was being imposed here in the context of what you had seen with the Giora railing. And our effort in reviewing this with the applicant was to come up with a railing design that is as minimal as possible, so that the ability of this particular project to provide both the enclosure that they need for the outdoor restaurant space with as minimal visual introduction into the that covered plaza space as possible. We've also looked at the fixtures and furnishings, and there's two types of umbrellas that the applicant would like to propose. One is a very large, what I call a cantilevered umbrella, and the other would be the standard octagonal table umbrellas. And our recommendation on this, because of the visual presence that those larger cantilevered umbrellas pose, we're proposing that those not be the type that are used, but rather they be the standard octagonal table umbrella that's typically seen through the downtown. The applicant is proposing that, as you'll see, I think on page 13 of the fixtures list, I'm sorry, page 12. It's a color called Tuscan. I think our copier has not done a good job of capturing that color. The image that I had seen originally was a color that's close to the orange that you see on the top part of the building. The other two items that we looked at with respect to this was that the railing be painted black to make it recede as much as possible. The applicant has proposed a series of planters that, as you look at the umbrella, as you look at the elevations on sheet, bear with me a second. Well, it shows up on ID 402, and they also show up on the renderings on ID 500 and ID 502. Our concern on these, again, was that we try to come up with something that would be as acceptable to the board as possible, with as little presence at that frontage as possible. Again, trying to make the overall barrier recede as much as possible. And then lastly, upon terminancy of the tenancy by El Patron Restaurant, they would be removing all the exterior fencing and restoration of the pavings. The applicant is here. He does want to talk about some of these things. There are a few things that he does not support in the staff recommendation, and we would like him to have an opportunity to make those presentations to you as well. And that concludes my staff report. We are recommending approval of it with those conditions. We're available to answer any questions as well.
All right, excellent. Mr. Gonzalez, would you like to come forward, please? For the record, if you'll introduce yourself to the board, please.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Mario Gonzalez. I'm here on behalf of Gonzalez Hospitality Group, LLC. I'd like to thank you and welcome everyone. Happy holidays, and thank you for your time. Also would like to thank Ken Lyon for all his time and passion that he provides to the city overall. In the audience, we do have Danny Grothwall, who is here with the Brandenburg building. They're the owners of the building. And we also have our team, Emily Watts, who designed the railing details and was very instrumental. And of course, Mr. Chiaffi, who is our architect, and we're very pleased to have him on our team. He's very well experienced here in the city, and I think he brings a lot to the table. Ken, thank you for the introduction, and you're right, I don't agree with all of the conditions, but I'd like to say that I've been in this business for about 35 years. I've worked with public and private business. I've been a developer here in the city. I've probably got about 3,000 doors. I've done a lot of commercial, residential. GHA Companies is our company. And I understand the importance of a board such as this board, planning commissions and everyone that, our responsibility to come into a city and provide something that is consistent with your vision, your long-term vision, thoughts, And we understand that this building here is a very, very special building. I'm very honored to be able to provide a restaurant business there. Our vision is to provide we're going to have a quality taqueria and bar. Our vision is to locally source all organic inspired food items, happy hour food, happy food, and also have crafted drinks. We have approximately 1,400 square feet of building inside. As you know, there's new laws, and we're still holding the 2 bathrooms, but we had to change one because of the new ADA laws. We're very sensitive to those. And we have about 900 square feet of patio. We are pleased to say that we will be restoring the glass that's on the side of Tockwitz. As you know, it's all painted over and so forth. And there's a fantastic niche there that's all stainless steel and so forth that we want to restore that, bring that to life as well. And of course, try to introduce some railing space. One of my items on one of the recommendations or one of the conditions were the umbrella tables, and I'm okay with them. The initial design thought was that they were kind of like a square or rectangular because the building was kind of that, but I'd be okay with, I guess, a post type of normal umbrella. I'd be okay with that. As far as the colors and so forth, in the packets we have some different colors, and I apologize sometimes that these colored copy machines don't really do a lot of justice to the colors, but we're trying to stay consistent with something with the tone of the building. And then also on the planters. The planters, I think, are a really good opportunity to create some softness. If you stand and look from that corner from Coffee Bean or something, it's just a sea of concrete, a sea of building, which the building is so beautiful because it looks floating. But, you have a couple of just planters there that have some palm trees coming out of it. And I think that the planters would give you, some really nice vertical and horizontal relief in the railing there. And with the minimalness of the railing, I've looked at every single patio on Palm Canyon, Indian Avenue, many, many times and study it. I'm a foodie. I've been a foodie. I've grown up here. I've been here for last 38 years. And, on one corner that we have the Tommy Bahamas, which is just completely open. And really, when you go by there, it's, it's really open and visible, safety-wise and so forth. And then you go to the other corner beyond our corner, and you have Kaiser, which has a total block wall of stucco. And I guess, things over time evolve, and, we remodel things, and you guys are certainly overseeing that with the historic buildings and so forth. But so we thought that our option number C was something that would provide some nice space, so our guests, which our patio is a huge part of our business, we have to make sure that, we can create the best patio we can so our guests can at least have some sense of intimacy, while they're dining and so forth, but still be in the great element of the city. And so we're hoping that, we can work around the option number C and then the planters. And anyway, I will be available for any questions I'm sure we may have, but if I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Chiaffi, our architect, to speak a little further on this, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely, yes. Please, Jim, if you'll join the...
Would you like me to stay here, sir?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mario. Yeah. Good morning, Jim Chiaffi.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We've been helping Mario and his group to get through the process here with his restaurant. They're difficult projects. Restaurants are difficult to do. They're involve so many different entities, and then when you add a oversight of an HSPB, it becomes another another place to go. But a little bit of little bit of history. I know this building very well. I worked in this building as a teenager, and it was open then, just like the pictures. And if it were up to me, I'd like to leave it open as well. Unfortunately, times change. We have alcoholic beverage control people and that sort of thing. We've evolved into an outdoor dining and drinking city, and it requires fencing. And again, I would prefer to not have any. And if I had my druthers, I'd prefer to not have the Hiroro railings go away. I think they're horrible, and I walk by them every day because I live right down the street. But anyway, all that being said, I'd like to commend Mario because when I first went to the site, I had a couple of requirements that I wanted to happen, and he's agreed to those. And one of them was to restore the columns to what they were once. They are a mosaic tile column underneath that paint. I think our friend Chris Mills painted those over. His office was upstairs, as I recall. But as I recall, but I didn't recall, they are mosaic. I think they're multicolored, but somebody told me no, they're yellow color. But anyway, we're going to strip those down and do our best to restore them. I think they're part of the building, and there's 2 or 3 of them in our patio. I think 2, and then there's one next to it, but there's at least 2 of them in our patio. And Mario and his group has agreed to do that. The second thing I saw when I first went to the site was the north facade of the building that was the enclosed part of the Starbucks. The back part of the Starbucks, there's a rock wall there with a glass clear story over it. It was painted out and blocked off, and Mario's agreed to take that glass and put it back and make the building float over the block like it was originally, or the rock like it was originally designed, and I think that's another big win. He didn't have to do that, and he's agreed to do that, and also to restore the marquee element that's below that, that was used for menus and whatever it was used for over the years, and could have the same kind of use. And that's a stainless railing, stainless picture frame. It's 6 or 7 feet wide, and it's a nice piece. It's built into the stone, so we're going to work on that. The doors are shot. I don't think they're original anyway. I'm sure, I think Starbucks may have replaced them at one time. They don't have the original handles on them or anything anymore, but we're going to replace them with something identical. But at least something that's clean and works well when you go in and out of the door. I worked with Mario's team on the enclosures, and I'm of a mind that first of all, those enclosures are temporary. They'll be there for as long as the business is there, and when they're gone, those will go away. And I think they're meant to be flexible. We talked a long time ago about when this building was designated as a Class 1, that the lower level be able to be modified as people come and go, because the building needed to have that flexibility for clients to thrive. And we know this from previous experience. I mean, you can recall our Robinson's discussions, the same thing. So I'm of a mind that that stuff needs to be flexible in everybody's mind and to accommodate the guests that are there. I don't think the planter elements hurt anyone. And in fact, they add something to that space. I was looking at the planters over at the Tommy Bahamas, and I think they add a lot to that patio. And they break up and interrupt the railing and that sort of thing. So we would strongly ask that we keep those planters and railing design as proposed. We're okay with the revision to the umbrellas. I think those are fine. I think the square umbrella would be nice with a single pole as opposed to the round. I think it fits the building better. Mario's made an attempt to, and we will attempt to match that color, the orange color. I think that would be nice on the lower level. So that's where we are today, and happy to answer any questions. The designer that worked on the railings is here as well. So Emily is here, and if there are any questions about that, or she can point out what her thoughts were on that.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Board, any questions of either Mr. Gonzalez or Mr. Chiaffi?
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Mr. Chiaffi.
Hi, Bill.
I'm looking for something to hang on to that the design proposed responds to the architecture of the building. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that?
Well,
the railing in particular,
yeah,
and the choice of furniture.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think one of the elements was the white stucco archway that I think picks up the cowl element that's around the front of the building. I think you can see that. I don't think the planters or the railing has anything to do with the building, because the building didn't have any railings on it at the lower level originally. And So I'm not going to say that those relate to anything. I think the color of the fabric that we can do introduces, or brings in the same color that's on the upper level, which I think would be nice. It doesn't have to be that way. They could be white or they could be black. So I'm okay with that, but I thought it was an interesting look. But I don't think the railing and planter needs to relate to the building. I don't know what else you'd do. I mean, would you do stainless steel planters that are, pick up the stainless steel railings upstairs, or, I don't know. But I don't think that was as important as the restoration of the columns, which I think is a big thing, the restoration of the glass, which is a big thing. Fixing that marquee is a big item, and these are expensive items to do. So there's a column inside as well, at least one that's exposed, that we're going to do the same thing to. And those are more important to me than a railing that might be gone in 10 years. So, and I'm hoping Mario is there for a long time, but I'm saying those are flexible things. A tenant could come in here 5 years from now and want to do a different planter, and so what, you know? Okay?
Mr. Staff.
Mr. Chair, one thing I forgot to point out in the staff report, when Mario refers to Scheme C, sorry, you'll see on in the 11 by 17 portion of your packet, there are 3 different schemes for these railings. One is a solid laser cut, one is a laser cut that goes up about 2/3, and one is a laser cut that goes up about 1/3. So you'll, that was, if you look at starting on page 401, 401 is that which is the most open. 402 has the railing on it, and 403 is partially. You see that?
I do.
Okay,
And thank
thank
you for bringing that to the attention of the
Bring
board.
that up.
Board, you see
That's
where,
what he's referring to when he says his preference is Scheme C.
And if I might mention to Mr. Lavoie, maybe as a little bit of a response to his comment, those laser cut panels are custom designed, and it's possible we could vary those if we wanted to. And I don't know what we would do, but there might be some element on the building. You know, there are some door handrails that have the little square designs on them, something like that. That could possibly be incorporated into that metal if we thought it was consistent or promotes some of the original design. So that's a possibility. These aren't built yet. And these aren't out of a book. These are going to be made locally by a local steel vendor that'll laser cut those. So there's something we could look at there. We could maybe come back with a design for that. But we do prefer that one, and no, we could come back with
so gentlemen, I'm sorry,
Shop drawing, you
which
know.
one do you prefer? So we can direct the board to that illustration.
If I may, sir, Mr. Chair.
Please.
ID 403 is something that we probably did about 50 studies on this thing, literally. And like I said, I really mean I have every rail in the city on Palm Canyon in Indian. But that ID 403, we also, if you notice, has a little bit of a cant at the top. And we think that's an interesting element, kind of brings you up to the building a little bit. It's very subtle. And then also, we strategically set that metal to be 1 inch above a table, so that if you're sitting here with your purse or something, or there's a dog that comes, there's a lot of pit bulls down, all that stuff downtown, and you know, where you're not gonna cover up anything, then you have that little rail. So we're gonna be about 1 inch above a normal table that you eat. And also, you know, you put items on the tables and so forth, and then we have that little vertical piece and that horizontal piece that's just above that 31-inch mark. I think it really makes it nice. And Board Member Voigt, to your point, you know, we tried to keep things, I've been in this business a long time, and I love this business, and I love buildings and stuff, but I think the pieces that we use, they're square. I've been a traditional builder where everything is angled, right? Now everything in Palm Springs, it has been, where it's all came back to the modern now. So, you know, I think the pieces are more modern. That's why the umbrellas originally were square, because we thought that might complement that. But as we said, we're okay. If Mr. Lyon thinks that the round ones are acceptable, that would be okay with us.
Excellent. Okay, so Linda, I know you have a question.
I do have a question. So, ID 401, that is fencing on the bottom and then clear panels?
I have the designer here,
Yeah, those are
Those
open.
are open.
Member Dixon.
Those are
Those are
open,
open.
Yeah,
open, so that top is open.
That's
Right.
correct.
It's just the little bit on the bottom, and then it's just an open,
That's correct.
nothing.
That's
right.
correct.
So the table is.
Table would be exposed on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
We didn't like
It
that
would
one
be,
so much.
if I could reference you, it would be down here. So I'd be eating dinner with a guest or whatever, we'd have this thing, and then the railing would be here. Our design was to bring it 1 inch above a table and then keep it open with a little bit of a cant, gives you some privacy, and I think works really well with the whole street scene.
Okay, I just didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I thought it was opaque glass
No.
in a railing,
The
so.
heat with the glass, we looked at that, board member Dixon, and you know, the heat of the glass, and then they scratch it. And then you got all that stuff, so we're trying to look long-term with that, and then sometimes you get that, you know, yellow element to that thing. So we want it to be cool and inviting and, you know, complement the building. That's why I really think that our option C is, I don't know what page that is.
403?
Yeah, 403 is a good compromise where we have the openness, and I hate to use the word privacy because, you know, we're all downtown, we're there to, you know, enjoy the people, and that's what it's all about, the experience. And we're not an F&B operator, we're developers and builders, but I've always tried to run my life and my business with, you know, the best people, the best process, and the best product. Certainly, in our developments, our product speaks for itself, and people, we have great people around the table here, and we try to surround ourselves with great people. So we're just trying to make this experience be part of a great process.
Mr. Chairman. may I
Please,
go on?
Linda, yes.
The green wall, where is the green wall? And is that real plants, is that fake plants, what is that?
Thank you for your question.
The green wall is in between the two spaces, I think. Maybe-
Yes, so the
Maybe
green.
Emily wants to
the-
address that.
Emily?
So on what page am I gonna look at that?
Emily, wait till you're at the mic, please.
Hello, it's
Good morning.
very nice to meet you. My name's Emily Woods. You can look at sheet ID 200, the floor plan for the patio area.
ID 200.
And there's two,
200?
yes.
202.
Oh,
Okay.
my apologies.
Yep, there we are.
Yes. So ID 202, there's two green walls that separate this dining area from the neighboring dining area. So they're called out with ACC 103.
If I may.
Okay,
If
I
you-
found one.
If you look on this plan, if you look on this plan, they're happening here, and it's happening here. So they're designed as a more opaque surface that would separate this outdoor dining area from the adjacent restaurant's dining area. So
Okay.
at the boundary over here on the west end, and at the boundary here between,
The
I
new
can see.
restaurant
Right.
I'm
and,
drawing a blank,
It's the
Antigua
Italian-
Kitchen?
yes.
Italian
Antigua
restaurant,
Kitchen?
yeah.
So they're happening to demarcate this outdoor dining area from the other.
Okay. And what is
Hides
the plant?
it hides the multicolored railing.
What
there
is
now.
the plant material?
So it's included in the specifications in the beginning, but it's an artificial plant material. So it replicates and serves the purpose of softening the ground floor plane, but it doesn't have actual plant material that could, you know, not serve well, just because it is partially shaded through a majority of the day. So it limits the amount of plant material there. So this gives us something that'll stay lush and green.
Emily, could you bring your mic just a
And-
little bit closer?
How are you gonna maintain that?
Well, this is, if I may, Board Member Dixon, is that if this is, the locations of the green wall is gonna be now it's called Antigua, is to the left. There's Palm Canyon. This is the wall that separates Palm Canyon and our fencing. Say our fencing's there. So we wanted to do is not disturb their business, their guests, and create something green. And what it is, it's a textured wall. You see it all the time, downtown cities. What it is, it's a fake mesh, and the mesh is like a green fern or a ficus or something. So all you really have to do is hose it off once in a while, and it lasts. And it's probably got about an 8 to 10 year life. It just depends how much it is exposed in the sunlight. But you know, we'll keep it maintained. But it's fake. It's not real, but it looks real. And it's just like a 4-foot section that you roll out, and then you put it up against that existing metal. We'll just go ahead and screw it to that existing metal. We did check with our neighbors next door. They thought it was a great thought.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
what do you mean by fake?
Not real.
Plastic plants?
Plastic, yeah.
Silk plants?
Silk, sir.
Silk.
Yes, I'm sorry, silk.
And do you realize how hot it gets here in the summer?
Yes, we do.
And the effect it has on anything that isn't real and or succulent?
Yes, I do, but also, part of that wall is part of the building wall. So when our neighbor's wall, there's probably 11 or 12 feet of where that planter or that wall that we're gonna create will be under the building. Sure. Yeah, so we're talking about,
You're good.
good, is that it's this planter wall right in here, and this building comes out. So there's probably gonna be about 6 feet maximum that'll be out of a covered area, and that is in the front area right here. And then also we're proposing it on this column. This is where we're restoring the glass. This is where we're bringing this back to life, this niche here. And also this is an element that we thought was very nice to pick up this element and have some kind of a portal entry. Here's our planters that we're talking about, which there's only 8 overall. And then the subject discussion right now is the planter here and the planter there.
So, the other planters, are they also going to have, are you proposing silk plants in those also?
No, Board Member Dixon, they will be live plants. Those will be real. And what we'll do is we do this all the time in our sales centers, our welcome centers. We put the water and stuff under the rail. And then we have pavers out there on that patio. So if we have to dig a drain or something, we have the ability to pop the paver without interrupting the surface and then putting in. But all the 8 planters, we're proposing a live succulent or something aesthetically pleasing.
And then you mentioned that you were going to expose the mosaic on 2 columns.
Right.
And when you look at the picture, there's 7 columns I counted across.
Well, this rendering here will give you a little bit of a better blow.
There are
up
only 2
where-
round columns
Yeah,
in
there's
our
the
patio.
2 right there.
In your.
That's right.
Yes.
And there's a couple inside, too, that we're looking at doing, inside the building.
So we're going to have, what we would have if this was approved, we would have the columns on your property back to the original mosaic and the columns on the neighboring property, columns.
I can clarify that
No,
for you.
we required those, Board Member Dixon, on the Giro project. Those columns have been restored to the mosaic.
So everything's going to be.
This is now catching up.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Okay. And then, thank you for that. I have one question of staff. What was your reasoning behind round umbrellas versus the square?
The square umbrellas, as you look at them in the renderings, have a large armature that is the part that cantilevers them. And we saw that as a lot of vertical structure that was happening out at the railing that just, for us, seemed to be more visual clutter. So by bringing them in and putting them into the table umbrella, they're less obvious at the railing.
Those are all my questions.
All right, excellent. Gentlemen, some more questions of our applicant, Jim and/or Mario, while they're here at the table. All right, seeing none.
Okay, thank
Gentlemen, but before you go, I do.
Oh, okay.
So I'm glad that we've clarified the columns, because this board did require Giro to restore those columns back in that day. Jim, I respect, and Mario, I respect that you're going to restore the niche. Those 2 niches, both at the one at Giro, that was a question of concern when we approved Giro those many years ago. The new doors into the building, that's a no-brainer. You have to have operating doors. I don't know about the window. I don't know this clear-story window above the rock. Ken, can you draw our attention to where
Sure.
that is? Naturally, when you're restoring something, I'm respecting that an awful lot.
It's right here.
There is a window there that we're not aware of before?
Starbucks painted it white.
Uh-huh.
It's glass.
Understood, yeah. No, I guess I just always miss that little detail.
It's really fantastic.
No, I remembered it from when I was young. There was a soda fountain behind that
Right?
area.
And
when
that's
it
a
was Milton
north
F. Price.
window.
Yep,
That's a
yep.
north window, so it's a great, a
Right.
lot of good lighting coming in there.
And that's going to be the new kitchen, but it will bring light, natural light into the kitchen, and we designed the equipment on that other side of that wall to be below that glass, so we don't look at any equipment. So we spent a lot of time on that.
Well, in completing my comments, Ken, I so respect that you put condition number 4 on your conditions. Upon termination of the tenancy by El Patron Restaurant, require removal of all exterior fencing and restoration of paving and other surfaces. This is the discussion that we've had in the last couple of months, especially when Giro Giro, with all of that exterior modifications, is now gone, and we are left with that. So I think that we asked that Class 1 buildings have this sensitivity applied, so I
That was-
really,
Yes, that was, the conversations that happened at a meeting or two ago, I'm sorry, involved this kind of railing, and the question was, can you impose these conditions to have them removed once the tenancy is vacated? You can impose the condition oftentimes when you have a tenant that's leaving. They're leaving because they have not been financially successful in most cases. So imposing this condition may or may not be totally possible. It's something you can certainly put in. The question is whether there's finances at the end of a person or a tenancy to actually achieve this goal. So it's there because you guys have said that it's important.
good. Well, and I thank you for that. I'd like to have the board talk about the umbrellas a little bit more, whether the square sort of infrastructure umbrella over the traditional round umbrella with the pole in the middle of the table. What is the board's feelings on that? Linda?
I personally feel that the square umbrella is a little more modern and contemporary and goes with the building. I understand the posts, but as far as the umbrella top, I like the square look with this building.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other?
Mr. Chair?
Please.
I think the objection is not the shape of the umbrella, but the armature that holds it up,
Right.
which has to be huge because it's doing this, whereas a center pole with a square umbrella on top would be perfectly fine.
Okay. Any other input on that? Dick, please.
As to the colors, I'm wondering, first of all, is there a relationship in the colors that were chosen to the mosaic or to the tile work on the tabletops? Was there any? Okay.
No, it's a taco restaurant.
right.
So there
And-
is a little bit of a Latin theme to the tabletops. We just felt that was part of that theme. We weren't too concerned about it. We did think, though, that we could get a fabric on the umbrella that would pick up the orange accent above, and thought that'd be kind of nice. And but it doesn't have to be if you don't think so, but we thought it was nice.
Would it be more appropriate if those colors were more of the period? That there would be some relationship to that. It's sort of like the paint situation in a way.
On the tile
So
tops,
that's-
are you talking about, or the?
The period of when this building was built, you know.
But what are you referring to? What?
The umbrellas,
Oh, the umbrellas.
the umbrella
Okay.
color. That's what I was talking about. So that there is some reference to those. That's my thought on the umbrellas.
We think the orange was original when that was painted. We found there's postcards of the building with the orange
Yeah.
panel. I
It,
think you-
it could be that the color that's coming out, as he said, is
Right.
just not really reflecting.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we wanted that be that color.
Yeah, what you had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm going to mention a couple of other things. First of all, I appreciate the sensitivity to this building, number one. That's so noted by this board. We need to do everything we can when things that happened that shouldn't have happened are now rectified. And speaking of that, can the railing that was done with the Giro and that I think also overlaps into this property, was that approved during the time of the Giro, that we allow that at that time?
Yes.
Okay. So at least this is going to be, get rid of some of that, right?
Well,
Yes.
what's interesting is this building, the railings that this one is primarily encompassing is the old Starbucks
Right.
corner, so that it's a rather black, kind of curvy railing right
Yeah.
now.
Right.
Along the Tockwitz Canyon side, there's about 25 feet of the Gioro railing that is actually, I think it's already
Right.
gone,
Yeah.
isn't it? So the good news of this.
Portion of it's gone.
Yeah, a good news of this project is it's getting rid of some of the Gioro railing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ken, and thank you, and Dick, hold those thoughts there, because it was a question I was going to bring up too. In your summary on this, it clearly says, and a portion of the outdoor dining area previously occupied by Giro. So this restaurant is reclaiming some space that rightfully should have been it and wasn't, but I don't think it was purely the decision of this board. It's more about a tenancy and a lease situation at that building.
That's right.
Yeah, so we
Giroro
did
had
nothing
the,
wrong. Just,
Yeah.
we did nothing wrong.
Giroro
We
had
just
the
followed.
north side, and they never used it. But
Yes.
it's been railed off, as you know. It had
Yeah.
some equisetum horse reeds on, at
Yeah.
one time, and that died, and they, you know.
All right, so
Okay.
good. So we're actually, or this restaurant will reclaim some outdoor space that it previously didn't have. So was that included in the 900 square foot outdoor space that you
Yes, sir.
mentioned earlier?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say it's 700 now and you're picking up another 200 or something like that?
In this particular image, Mr. Chair, this is the bay that had
Okay.
previously been part of the Gioro
Excellent.
outdoor space. There's still a portion of it
Yes.
here that will remain, and there's a portion of it on the Palm Canyon side that will remain. But the positive thing that's happening here is that this portion is getting removed, and it'll be, whatever
match
is
our
it that you guys approve here, something that's more receding in its.
Yes,
Visual
and now
character.
the restoration of that window is a part of the Patron restaurant and no longer a part of Giro.
That's correct.
All right, so I think that's a
Yeah,
major
it is.
win there, a nice plus.
So
I-
is the portion you can see along Palm Canyon. So this portion, this portion remains. The portion that's at the corner that used to be Starbucks will be the new railing.
Yes, so we're gaining the space on Tockwitz.
Right, that's
Okay.
correct.
I'll come back. Todd, please.
So I have a question, Ken. That portion that's remaining on the Tockwitz side of that old
Gioro railing?
thing, is that space not being used by the current occupant of that restaurant?
I don't know. The current restaurant occupant is Azteca Kitchen?
Antigua.
Antigua.
But
I've only seen that they've got currently chairs and tables along the Palm Canyon side. I don't know what their lease space is on the inside.
so can we ask that they remove the rest of it then?
It's not part of this particular
Yeah.
tenant's
I'm sorry, Ken.
space.
Danny has his hand up and like he might know something about that. But Danny, you'll need to come forward, please.
Thanks. I'm Danny Grathwall. I'm the property manager at that building, representing the owner. The Antigua Kitchen and Bar, they have that patio space, and they do intend to use it. They just haven't opened it up yet because they've only been open for 2 months now.
Okay.
So then, how is Patron putting their railing on the space that still belongs to Giro Giro?
There was an agreement between the ownership and both restaurants that, that El Padrones could take a portion of that restaurant, I'm sorry, a portion of that patio space,
Okay.
and the new tenant was willing to give up
But that's
that
all an
portion.
agreement between the parties, and it doesn't affect
Correct.
us?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Does that answer it for you?
I have one other question. So, and I don't know, either Mr. Chiaffi or Ken, the existing wrought iron railing fencing that's at the Starbucks, I assume that meets code requirements for food service?
All that the food service requires in terms of the ABC is a barrier. They don't distinguish how much barrier, simply a barrier.
So you could even have less than what's there currently at the Starbucks?
You could
and
even
still
have
meet
less
code?
than what's there. If you look at, there's a, I think, is it Ruby's that's in El Mercado Plaza? They literally have large precast columns in a chain. So the point that the ABC is looking for is that there is a barrier there.
So you could have a simple wrought iron railing with a vertical post every 18 inches?
Yes,
Okay,
technically.
thank you.
Okay. More questions, please?
Go ahead.
Todd asked my question, but to carry it further, is there any way we could require Antigua, is that the name of the restaurant?
Yes.
To remove that portion of old fencing to match the fencing at the corner?
There really is no project that's before you right now with that. So it's really a separate tenant space. There's not a relationship between what this tenant is doing in terms of the investment they're putting into their tenant space for the adjacent. If the adjacent were to come in and request modifications to that exterior dining terrace, you could certainly request that at the time. But it's not part of this particular project, so it's, for lack of a better term, there's not a nexus here, I guess
Thank
is the
you.
simplest way of saying it.
I have one more question.
Dick, please.
In reference to lighting on the interiors, I understand that we do not have total privy on that. However, having worked on another project where lighting became an issue, I'd just like to ask, what is planned for the lighting on the interior of the building as it might have a relationship to the exterior? Has that been specified yet?
On the interior, we have a grid of pendants that are individual light bulbs, but they're above the 9-foot ceiling plane, so they're not visible. What might be visible are a few pendants over the tables, and they're a three-dimensional Monrovian star. It's traditional of Mexican
Okay.
interiors and lighting, so there's a few of those that might hang down, just one at each table.
So there's no ceiling lighting that would create an issue to the exterior of the building?
There
right?
was, a lot of it's gone now, there was when it was
I
Starbucks.
thought so, yeah, right, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, all right. Any further discussion? I'd like to just keep the umbrellas alive for a minute, whether it is the desire of the board to go with a traditional round center table or as the umbrellas are proposed here. So I'd like to get a consensus on that for staff. And then I think we still have a decision to make on which of the railings, 400, 401, 402, is that correct? Okay, so we still need some movement on that. Mr. Lavoy, yes, please.
Thank you. There's a lot that's here that is good. One, this is a perfect location for a restaurant with outside seating. I like the idea of restoring the building to its original appearance. I like the incorporation of real landscape into the railing. I think it's a nice way to break up the railing. But the problem I have, it comes with a commendation. This is a perfectly lovely design for a Spanish colonial building. It would be absolutely perfect in Santa Barbara, and I wish we could get people to do something this appropriately traditional in Santa Barbara, but they always want to do something modern up there, and it's not appropriate on this building. I understand branding. But I'm here for the building more than the tenant. So what I would prefer to see is something more appropriate to the design of the building and something we could use at all the other tenant locations, universal enough that this becomes the standard for the building. So when those posts go away, it would be the preferred railing that we would like to see all over the front of the building. So the uniformity of the building would stand out in the design of what is new. So I would be asking for, well, one, that the planters not be black plastic. Black plastic does not survive in this climate. That no artificial material be used in the plant material. It will not survive in this climate and weather. That the railing design be more sympathetic to the period of significance of the building, to be more modern. If the arch is going to be there, again, that rather than a white plaster arch, if you're restoring the stainless steel casing, it would probably be more modern to be a stainless steel arch. It's not actually thick enough to be credible as a stucco element. It would be very credible as this lovely stainless steel sort of frame, or metal frame. Black metal is a lot less expensive than stainless steel. I'm not so sure about the cant on the rail. It looks forced to me. It almost looks like it was added on later. And I think square umbrellas, if the railing's black, then maybe the umbrellas are black, and it becomes part of an element of that, and not sort of working with or fighting the building. Although black and yellow isn't a great color combination. We think of it as a warning typically. So the orange might be better. So in the choice of furniture, again, it's only furniture, it's easily removable, but again, it's sort of like it's too traditional for this building. It's like, it's like buying a mid-century modern house, and then you move your grandmother's American colonial furniture from Philadelphia, and you wonder why it doesn't really fit, and it disintegrates in a few years. I'm looking forward to this whole building becoming something nice, and this is an opportunity to sort of set the corner and then let it bleed out beyond. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. More comments, please.
I'll go.
Todd.
So I pretty much agree with all of staff's recommendations. I think with respect to the umbrellas, I think a central pole, just for its lack of, it doesn't have the footprint that the cantilevered ones do. I'm fine with them being orange, blue, yellow, green. I myself would prefer the option of everything that's permanent, especially the fencing, be as minimal as possible. And if you want to attract attention to your space, let the chairs be orange, let the tabletops be multi-colored tile, let the umbrellas be orange, and let people look at things or be attracted to your space, or to focalize, to draw their attention, not by that railing that's going to disturb the building and the architecture, but rather by the umbrellas and the tile and things like that. And also, if you put some really bold graphic tile tables, it's going to instantly read what your restaurant is, in my opinion. With respect to the fencing, it absolutely needs to be more simple than it is. I couldn't agree more with what Bill said as far as establishing some sort of a precedent that moving forwards, we don't have to keep having this battle every time a new tenant moves in. It would be great to have it set a precedent and a standard. In looking at the window pattern on the north-facing facade of the building, you could perhaps draw in that grid pad pattern of the windows and have that made out of simple black wrought iron. That could be carried on when the other tenant moves out. And also, it would let your furnishings and whatever branding collateral you had on the inside stand out more. I think there's a benefit to you to having a very simple fencing that fades away. As much as I didn't like that wrought iron that's currently at the Starbucks, in comparing it to what's proposed, it doesn't show. And so some very simple wrought iron, I think, is going to be much more sensitive to the building, and I think also could afford you something. And ultimately, if people are eating on a sidewalk, they're eating on a sidewalk. Putting a barrier between them and the sidewalk seems kind of antithetical to why you're having outdoor dining. People want to be in the crowd, so let them immerse themselves in the crowd and not jeopardize the integrity of the building at the same time. With respect to the planters, I'd rather see nothing there, but that's my opinion. Again, simple wrought iron fence that picks up some sort of an element that's already existing in the building would be more appropriate. And absolutely with respect to the removal of that when, even if it's 50 years from now, when your tenancy concludes, that be removed. But I think that's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. Staff, I'm coming back. No one's leaving yet. No one's leaving yet.
But we can do that in a minute.
So my question was going to be about standardizing the railing. In the 5 years that we've been sitting here, we've talked about a number of railings here now at the Oasis building. And does this board have the ability to standardize a railing? Should we decide on a railing today for the new Patron restaurant? Can that be conditioned on all future tenancies in that building next door to go with a simple standard railing?
Yes, you could do that as those future tenant improvements come in. If the future tenant came in, if Antigua Kitchen leaves in 10 or 15 or 20 years and it comes back before us with a request for a railing, you could request that the railing match the railing that's going in at this time with this project, if it's one that you would like to set as the standard.
On the subject of the railing, I'm really torn here. I like the privacy that the railing you're proposing provides. You know, the table is below the railing. It creates an intimate enclosure. I get all that. But one can only look at Lulu's, and Lulu's is literally just an amorphous railing that is almost invisible, and it's very successful there. Bill, on your request that the arch be a stainless steel arch, I assume this is going to be a full year-round restaurant. Stainless steel will heat up terribly. One could easily, I mean, we know in the summertime, you touch a doorknob or in the car, how. Sorry?
So little black iron, even more.
But I think this is a stucco element, and I'm not, just trying to have all of the concerns expressed from the board. I am a little concerned about a stainless steel archway that somebody wearing a t-shirt or a tank top is going to brush up against. And I just think that the stainless steel element, as aesthetically pleasing as it would be for me, I am more concerned about the heat that it might generate. While you mull that over, Ms. Dixon.
I'm having a hard time understanding the need for an arch.
I think that's an ABC thing, isn't it?
No, we wanted a portal so that people would know, an entrance to the building. Let me address the stucco steel. I don't know if some of you are aware of the patio of the Hilton. We did all that work at the Hilton, and there's There's this arch element we use there. It's painted steel. It's gray. It's not a problem. It doesn't pose a heat problem.
Okay.
People touch it and it's a little warm, they stay away from it. So I'm okay with going with the metal idea. I think it'd be lovely, and it could be black, it could be gray, it could be painted silver to look like. It could be stainless if we can afford it. You know, that's all TIG welded and all that, but it could be. I want to make a suggestion here because I see maybe at least a split vote, if not something worse today for us. We're trying to get open here. We're in plan check. We're trying to finish. The interior's almost finished, and we need to get this patio going. I'd like an opportunity, if the chair would agree, to sit with a subcommittee of this board. With Emily and I could sit and come up with a railing design that would suit everyone. That could be then incorporated later. We could maybe get rid of that hideous multicolor thing down the road, hopefully, and keep that. I think we've already agreed we're good with the umbrella change to the single pole with a square umbrella. And again, it could be any color. It could be several colors, who cares? But maybe perhaps a solution today so that we can move forward, because we can't come back in January or February with a new design and run the risk of that not being acceptable either. We need to get this done. So maybe that's a thought that you could think about, Mr. Chair, and be happy to come back before Christmas if two of you can meet or whatever it takes and get this done. If we may.
Jim, I think
Something
it's
to
a good
consider.
I think it's a fine suggestion, and staff, you're all fine with that as well?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Just one more quick, in looking back on the summary, the staff recommendation is indeed to eliminate the fiberglass planters proposed at the perimeter railing to visually simplify the design, and the artificial planter dividers. So as we've been sort of struggling with that artificialness, it's also staff's recommendation to eliminate that element as well. Am I reading that correctly?
You are reading that correctly.
Oh, good, thank you. All right, so staff, or excuse me, board, how about a subcommittee, Todd and Bill, to work with Mr. Chiaffi? No, I think both of your suggestions are excellent. Do I get agreement from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I'd be happy to, but I somewhat disagree. That I think the planters help break up the line, and I think they're a nice aesthetic addition to just this rail.
So, Bill, on that thought then.
But just not the plastic.
No, understood. So, but on that thought then, if our goal is to sort of work towards a standardized railing for the building,
Yeah.
then these planters would become a part of that standardized element? Mm-hmm. All right, board, am I?
So I
Todd?
would probably opt for then maybe a cylinder shape versus that
Yeah,
trapezoid.
there are lots of options.
Right. So, and I guess I'm fine being, if the board's in agreement, I'm fine with being on a subcommittee. I'm perfectly willing and wanting to do that. I guess the question is the subcommittee coming up with the solution then? Or is it then not coming back to the board?
The way we would use a subcommittee in this case is the board would take an action today. So you would potentially approve the project with these particular conditions. You don't have to accept the staff conditions, but whatever conditions you want to place on this project, subject to further refinement of the railing that would be reviewed, proposals by the designer that the subcommittee would review and provide comment on, and ultimately make a recommendation on approval of it. So it would not come back to the board for approval on the railings. If you sit with the applicant's designers and work with them to come up with a railing that you feel as a subcommittee is sympathetic to the building, that would be the railing that would be approved. So the board is delegating that authority to a subcommittee.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the way the subcommittees basically work, because when you've got
Yeah.
only a meeting per month and you've got a situation where you've got pressure for a tenant to get in, it works fairly effectively.
All right. Emily, I'd pose this question to you. One of the suggestions here today was to sort of mimic the window glazing, the window framing on the north side of the building as a potential jumping off point as the creative person here. How do you feel about that?
I think we can work within that rectilinear grid that's
Yes,
created.
thank you,
and
Mario.
mimic
Good
that
visual.
down into the railing, so that it becomes less visually obtrusive.
Okay.
And more minimal.
All right. So, no, I think we're getting somewhere good here. So any further questions or comments to staff and/or the applicant right now? Linda?
I would not like to see artificial plants. And Ken, I don't know is there a way to condition that the planters have to be kept up? Because all too often I see planters along the street that are dying, or there's cigarette butts or styrofoam cups, and I hate to see that, especially on our main drag through town.
Those are things that would be taken care of under the city's normal public nuisance policies. If somebody sees a condition where a building is not being kept up, planters, railings, outdoor patio furniture, and so on, those would come in as a public nuisance complaint through the code enforcement process.
And I just would like to express that I like the simplicity of a fence. The simpler, the better. Let the message and the impact come from the furniture, from very colorful tables, good umbrella tops, but simple chairs, because I agree with whoever said that you're buying a modern house and you're moving grandma's furniture in, and it isn't pleasing to the eye to see that. So thank you.
Further question, and Jim, I'm going to come back to you in a minute. In speaking about Lulu's, and Lulu's really open, you can duck under it, you could practically step over it. Do you know if there's any security risk to the furniture being stolen in the middle of the night when these patios are really without much barrier or without much point of entry? Is there a risk to the tenant and his furniture and his outdoor patio furniture?
Most tenants along Palm Canyon and some of those on Tockwitz that do have outdoor furniture will often either bring them in or they will often chain them together at night. So different tenants handle their furnishings and security in their own way. The railings that are at Lulu are very open. There are various cross members, though, that are sort of in curves that fall underneath the horizontal rail. If somebody wants that furniture bad enough when it's sitting out there unlocked up at night, which none of it, I think, is usually sitting out there unlocked, they could get it. But it's not really a situation where the railing is bettering that or worsening that. Does that answer your question?
It does. So, applicant, thank you very much for, Jim, did you have some closing arguments?
If it's okay with the chair, I'd like to ask if she would, ask Linda to join our committee. And you'd have three. It still wouldn't be a quorum, but I think she has a lot to say here, and I
Linda,
really
can you make
appreciated her
yourself
comments.
available?
If that's okay. Would you be willing to join us?
All right. And is that okay with Mr. Lavoie and Mr. Hayes? All right, excellent. All right, so I know. So, gentlemen.
You're going to be gone, so
I will be.
Can't impose on you.
So I'll Mario, did you have some closing argument, please?
Yes, thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the board for their time and this discussion. I mean, I've been before many committees my whole career, and I love this type of discussion, and I love the passion that you guys have. But, you know, I'm trying to get open. Could we do this before Christmas? Does that work with the super committee, board member Hayes?
I can meet on Friday.
Okay, so let me, Mario, thank you. It's a good question. You have one availability day?
I'm out of town tomorrow and Thursday. I'll be
Alright.
back on Friday.
Okay,
Any-
Todd, your availability?
Town till Thursday. Till I'm out of town for a week.
From
From
tomorrow on.
until through Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, yeah. Linda, your availability?
I'm available Friday morning. I have a meeting around, a luncheon meeting, and then
So we're going to eliminate the number of people on the subcommittee because I want to move this forward. No, it's only fair to the applicant that we do this in an expeditious. Vincent, are you available?
I'm available.
All right. So can I make the subcommittee Mr. Lavoy, Ms. Dixon, Mr. Marsh?
If those individuals are willing.
Yes, and I think that they are for the availability. And what action do we need to take to get this subcommittee meeting scheduled for Friday?
I will get this coordinated.
Okay, excellent.
Sounds like we have either an AM or a PM on Friday morning. Vincent, do you have any other specific constraints that day?
No, I'm okay.
You're open?
Could we set it for 9 o'clock on Friday morning?
Everybody good with that?
You good with that?
That work?
Is that okay with you?
All right.
That's fine with me.
Okay, so then
Should
let
we-
me ask
should we
this
meet here?
question.
Meet at City Hall?
City Hall will be closed.
Ken will decide.
We
at
can meet
the
at my,
site?
we can meet at my
Let me
office?
figure, yeah, we may be able to meet there. Let me figure it out.
Okay. Just so you know, Board Jim's office is just right close here on Talkwood, so if you had to meet there. Now, Emily, will you have an opportunity between now and Friday to kind of come up with a scheme that the board has sort of indicated they'd like to go in?
Yes, absolutely. I have
Okay.
time to, sit down and reevaluate the design and come up with something that's more minimal and more appropriate to the comments that are made
Okay,
today.
so while you're all still here, board, our staff recommendations were to limit the table umbrellas to a standard center pole, and I think we are in agreement on that, okay? Simplify the design of the proposed new railing, so that's obviously why we have established a subcommittee for that. Eliminate the fiberglass planters. Now, we still kind of like planters, but not fiberglass, and so
We were looking at several options with those, including metal and concrete.
Okay.
And I feel like the concrete would be the most appropriate because it's not going to hold the temperature and it's going to hold up very well.
Okay, and the board's direction to the subcommittee is to maintain a planter, okay? And then upon the termination of the tenancy, I think we're all in agreement on that. We did talk about the portal, the need for a portal or not a portal. I personally like a sense of entry. I've sold houses for 40 years. People want to know where the front door is. I think it's an important element. So if that could still be incorporated, I think that's an important element, whether it be stucco or bronze or something else, Bill. All right? Do we still have agreement on all of that?
Mr. Chair?
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
I believe the other clarification that you had was that you were okay with them being square umbrellas. It wasn't necessary for them to go to octagonal. And that
Yes,
they could be
and color
affiliates.
was to the applicant's choosing, but we did like a square umbrella over, especially if this new railing starts to become a grid of squares, maybe the umbrella and the windows, it all starts to, and we got a nice thumbs up from Mr. Gonzalez, okay? All right, so we've formed a subcommittee that's going to meet as early as this Friday. And we're in agreement on the staff's recommendations. Oh, Dick,
As modified,
sorry?
as modified.
Yeah. And then about the furniture, can we allow the tenant to evoke the theme of his restaurant in the furniture and the tabletops?
If they do everything else we ask them, I think that's just fine.
All right, well then, Dick, are you okay with that too? All right.
Forget, we did the glass and the columns too, Bill.
Yeah, all right. So then I think, Ken, we're looking for a motion to approve subject to the conditions and the findings of the subcommittee.
That is correct.
And that is the motion. Linda, you
I
can,
have one last question.
please, it's a question.
With number 4, restoration, I just want to make sure that if this tenant moves out and they're restoring things, they don't plaster up the columns again.
No,
Because
no, no,
that is the
no, no.
way they originally found them.
Yeah,
Need more money.
So,
yeah, yeah.
The intent would be that it would be restored, that they would be taking it back and patching those surfaces to match the existing.
However, if we are going to standardize a railing Todd, yeah.
Right, yeah, no.
Please, go ahead.
No, so that's what I was just gonna say, so if this becomes the standard, then 4 would go away. So, yeah, so I think the goal would hopefully to come up with a standard, so 4 doesn't need to be in the motion because it's not going to go away.
Well, the
That's it.
standard would be in the railing, but not necessarily in the paver.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ken, you're gonna have to work out that detail.
So the conditions, as I'm understanding them, and let me read them back as I heard you say them, that table umbrellas are fine. They are fine to be in a color that is complementary with the building. And they are fine to be, if the applicant chooses for them to be, the square umbrellas.
Yeah.
On the matter of the railing is being delegated to a subcommittee for final design approval in a design that will be something that reflects the grid of the north facade upper window. The planters, the board is open to allowing planters to be there. However, they would like the planters to be something other than fiberglass so that the plants have a better chance of survival. And that if the railing design can be done in a way that it can be established as a standard for the building, that you would remove the staff's condition number 4, requiring its removal at the end of the tenancy. And I think that makes sense. That's a very difficult one to impose on a tenant as they're leaving. So I think you're moving in a good direction with those ideas, I think.
And I think the board is in agreement that the tenant may choose their furnishings and
Correct.
tables and color of the umbrellas and all of that. All right? So that's the motion. We had
Mr.
some
Chair.
further, I don't have a second yet.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
As to the design of the building, rather than, say, a square grid, I would prefer having it be appropriate to the period of significance of the building and inspired by the building.
But now,
I'd like to leave the designer a little bit of openness in that, rather than just come back with a square
Okay.
grid and
all
say
right.
it's just
Emily, are
fine.
you understanding kind of his direction? The period of the building?
Using the
Well,
international style
yes,
to-
I mean, it's sort of like you could come back with a square grid and it would be fine and it wouldn't really be design.
So
I
we're
wanna
trying to
give-
find something.
I want you to be inspired by the building and
We
come
know,
up with a design.
we know what to do. We can study, we've got
So,
books
so
on.
I don't
we know
want to
what do.
limit you. I think.
Okay,
Ms.
thank you. We'd rather not be limited. Thank you.
Okay, I will second the motion then.
Okay, so there's our second. Can you have all of the conditions, et cetera?
Yes, I do.
All right, any further discussion on item 4B before us today? Dick?
One last thing. I
Please.
would just like to add, not for a vote, not even for discussion, but at the January meeting, that there be a report back
Oh,
from the
sure.
subcommittee as to what is that, but no vote, no discussion.
No, no, because basically, Dick, we're approving this. We are approving this subject to the conditions, and the conditions will be met by the subcommittee and the staff?
Staff will be attending, but the decisions will be made by the subcommittee,
Yes,
not staff.
yes, no, I'm sorry, yes, but under the guidance of staff.
There you go.
Yeah. Mario?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Danny, would it be appropriate if you, representing owner, be part of this at all? I mean, just give a thumbs up or thumbs down, or you don't, doesn't?
I certainly can be.
I mean, with respect to the property owner, I mean, it is his building and so forth, and, you're gonna have to disclose to any future tenant or anything that they have to live with that, so I'm just asking, from an owner's perspective.
Sure, absolutely. Danny, if your time permits, that'd be generous of you. Thank you. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so first, second, no further discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time,
No, thank
ladies
you.
and
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much.
Mr. Chair, congratulations on your tenure and guidance and leadership. Look forward to seeing you soon.
I hope so, Jim. Thank you. All right, excellent, excellent.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you all. Vincent?
Mr. Chair, I propose that we meet at 9:30 at the Starbucks across the street on Friday.
No, wait, just a second. Staff,
No?
where the meeting time and place will be, I think at Mr. Chaffee's office.
It's 2121 Tockwitz. It's
Okay.
Corner Tockwitz and Cerritos. It's easy to find. Has an orange truss, orange metal truss.
Okay.
matches
All
the
right,
building.
it's just down the street from here, and that way you'll be, yeah. Yeah. You'll be in a professional situation without, disturbance, okay? All right, again, thank you all very much. We are at number 5 on our agenda, and this is discussions. And Dick, I think you're going to head us up on 5A, National Preservation Month Symposium.
Right. Today, I'd just like to focus on the awards to get the board's input and decision. I'd like to see this continue to be a major focus of the event, because I think it's really important to show respect and honor those people that really have created some wonderful examples here of the work they've done for preservation. So I'd just like to suggest that the awards be named Preservation Matters Annual Award, and that there be consideration for a Legacy Award. I have a couple of recommendations on that. And that the other part of it is, we talked about a few months before, I brought up that we have one more recognition for those properties who have become designated in that particular year as Class 1, that there be a certificate of recognition for those. This year, there are only 2 to date, and that's the Oasis, the Casitas, and the dining room. And the other one was for the Barrett residence, AKA William Holden. So that we really, zero in on, these designations are very, very important, and I think the people that are receiving them that I've noticed, they become, I think, quite coveted as an award. So, but I really want the input from the board as to your recommendations. And I thought Ken identified well as an example of what the Preservation Matters Award could be, whether it's an acknowledgement of a preservation project or a repurpose. We can, that can change year to year, I guess, from the standpoint of, what we think would be inappropriate. So I'd asked Ken to send out that letter to you all earlier. So if you could give me any input as to particularly the preservation matters, and I agree with Ken, if we keep it to 1 or 2, unless we have a year that there's, there's reasons to expand it, but I think it really makes it very special if we do that. So if there are recommendations now, before I give you mine, I want to hear from you all. This is the board's decision.
You're saying 2 awards?
Yes.
Not 3, 2
One-
awards?
Well, if there's a reason for having 3, we could always do that. But I'm just saying that we should probably be, 1 or 2 awards, but if there's the reason to do 3.
I think there should be 2 awards and not more. To me, this is something special, and if
It
you
is.
have an award for this
Yep.
and an award for that, it
Right.
kind of loses its
Right.
significance in my eyes.
Right.
And has the committee thought about writing a description for each award so that in the future boards know what is involved in order to give the award to someone? You explained it to us, but is there a description that we can use to determine what the award is? What's the criterion?
I think Ken identified that in his note to everybody when he talked about this, as an example, best adaptive reuse could be a category. We're talking about categories here. And I think the categories, though, may change from year to year. and then the other for best stewardship. Those are two great categories that I think we could work with. So I think they're somewhat self-explanatory when you think about best adaptive reuse or best stewardship. I mean, do we really need more elaboration on that? Or are they sort of just explanatory?
Todd?
So I'd also like us to think about whether or not we have to have one or two and not make it mandatory. My concern is, and then I agree completely with Linda that having a description of the awards would be great. It would really help me right now. I can't remember what all of them are, what the other ones were. And my concern is with mandating that we have an adaptive reuse, what if A, there is none, and what if the one we have doesn't achieve or
Right.
attain the quality and the status of the ones that have gone before it? I mean, like the Robinsons is amazing. I mean, that, raises the bar really high. And so perhaps trying to attain that bar might be difficult, but I don't want to, do something that's going to diminish the previous awards either. And so I guess I personally am a little hesitant to say that we're always going to do one or two. I would rather it be an option. And these are the options, meaning, the adaptive reuse or the steward or whatever else they are.
Right.
The legacy, I'm cool with that, but having a description. But also what would help me is something to refresh my memory as to who we've given it to previously.
And
Well,
why?
the list that Ken provided us was the Bank of America, Robinsons, La Serena Villas, Taquas Plaza, the Royal Hawaiian Estates, the Hayman Residence, the Frey House, and the Desert Star Apartments, and the Willows and O'Donnell. Those are the ones that we've given in previous years.
And that's the full list?
Mm-hmm. The first year, we only did one. The second year, we only did one.
Yeah,
2018, we did 3.
right. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Lavoy.
There's one other category that's missing. It's people who dedicate their lives to preservation. Preservation is their life and their passion. And those people should be recognized as much as the buildings that are the end result.
Right. And that's what I was thinking of, the Legacy Award, sort of as a concept that sort of fits what you just identified. So you like that idea? Okay.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. And then I would think that we would just give one award for something in the city.
That's fine.
For me to have that award and then 2 more awards, we're not that big of a city, and we don't have that many projects going on, and so.
Okay, I'm fine with that. That's why I wanted the input from everybody. I appreciate that.
Ken?
And so if we sort of zero in then on a Legacy Award concept, if you will, do I have input before I give you mine?
Can we do this by email?
By mail?
Yes,
I think that would be a great idea.
thank you.
No,
Dick,
for many reasons.
Dick, before you give us your suggestions, can, in this email exchange back and forth about the number of awards or what awards and all, and I apologize if I just thought this happened, wasn't there some discussion that this board recommends to the City Council Class 1 historic designations of properties, and then in response, those homes get a plaque? And what greater designation or recognition from the city is that plaque? And does this board does this board even get into the business of awards, making awards, even a certificate of recognition?
That's really your call. When you first, I don't remember what year this first was brought into the symposium, but the symposium, its primary goals, as I understand it, is its education. It's educating the community, raising the community's awareness on preservation. The award, I think, if I were to give you a recommendation, I would say keep it as flexible as possible. If you choose to call it a certificate of recognition, and if this year your recognition is for a person, there's nothing wrong with that. If next year you have a project that comes through that is just a stellar adaptive reuse, it could be a certificate of recognition recognizing an extraordinary adaptive reuse. If you have a project that were to come in as a restoration, where it was truly being taken back to its original condition, you might do a certificate of recognition for the most sensitive restoration. I think that your purpose in doing the certificates is, again, to recognize the effort that business owners and property owners are putting forth in support of the preservation goal. So you're simply saying, we recognize people as doing things that support this mission, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you choose to do it, there may be years where you feel like it was just a dry year, and there's nothing that really, there's nothing that really rises to the level that you really want to recognize. There's nothing wrong with that. With the markers, if you want to make it more of a personal thing at the symposium, where if you've done a class 1 or there have been a couple of class 2s this past year, the markers are the educational piece at the site. If you wanted to make a certificate recognizing those sites that have had class 1 designation this year,
I like that.
you could certainly do so. Keep in mind, some of the building owners were not in support of their designation. They might not choose to attend. That's okay. It's your effort to recognize the efforts of the community in support of the mission that you're all working on. So I would leave it in that realm and have you think about it in that term. Sorry.
And Dick, I promise I'm gonna come back to you, but one of my notes here today, and this really got me thinking about our award ceremonies. We gave our very first certificate of recognition to Bank of America.
I believe so.
And Bank of America has come here many times in the last 5 years for air conditioning units on the roof, for lighting, pole lighting in the parking lot, a restoration of the plinth around the building. We have seen Bank of America a lot, and we really recognized Bank of America. I bank at Bank of America. They removed recently their original 8-inch square linoleum tile in the main building and replaced it with a distressed wood plank like you would see in a nice New England home or in a wonderful cottage somewhere. We went to such great lengths to preserve the exterior, the ambiance of this building, and now you open those doors and walk in and it's like, what is this old wood distressed floor doing in here? So we don't have purview on the interiors of these buildings, but this is a building that we've spent a lot of time with and have recognized a few years ago. And as often as they have come here, and we've allotted them for removing the black surface-mounted, not black, square surface-mounted light fixtures and restoring the circle, and then they go and do a distressed wood plank floor in that interior. So I would just be a little more cautious about the giving of these awards because we only have so much control. And we have no control over the interior of the Bank of America, and they've gone ahead and done that. So I'd just be cautious about being in the certificate of approval or awards business for the board? Because I'll tell you, that floor, oh, my God, that floor. Dick,
No, I'm
please.
fine with, I mean, I really, you know, I'm very open. That's why I asked this to be getting all of your input. I'm not hung up about it one way or the other. I felt it was part of the education process of what we've been doing and acknowledging people for their efforts in, and to me, preservation. And I've kind of zeroed in on preservation matters. And that's kind of become our theme, our overall, and then we do for the annual event that we've been having. So I'm open. I really am. So if we don't want them, that's,
Dick.
you know, we've got, as we know, we're fighting for time, I mean, for space in that program anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Dick, I would ask your subcommittee members, both Marsh and Kaiser, your thoughts on this, because you guys have been, you know, putting this together for a long time. Vincent, what are your thoughts on it, please?
Right now, the subcommittee maybe just should meet and discuss, as Linda suggested, do the description for the various awards and come up with potential recipients.
Okay, yeah. Dan, any thoughts, please?
I mean, I'm totally fine if there are no awards some years, you know.
Some years,
Some
yeah.
years, yeah. If there's something that's worthy or a person that's worthy, then we give an award, and otherwise it's not something that we really have to do. So I like the flexibility of being totally open about it.
All right. Well, how does the board, Linda, I'll come right back. How does the board feel about just keeping the subcommittee in control of this aspect of the symposium? Linda?
I think when we started out, I wasn't here the first year, but the second year I was here, and we decided to acknowledge Bank of America because we thought they did such an outstanding job. At that point, I don't remember us thinking this was going to be a yearly award. I thought this was something we just wanted to acknowledge and show our appreciation. For me, this symposium is about education, not so much highlighting people in the community. So if we give a good symposium and we have great speakers and we're giving knowledge to people that they haven't had, I don't really feel it's necessary to give an award. So awards, that to me is not the important part of what we're here to do.
Well, Dan, please.
However, when something is worthy of an award, I think it's very important to acknowledge that because it brings the community more together and it allows the community to be a part of what we are trying to promote. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have on this board in doing historic preservation is getting the support from the community.
But does it have to be an award, or is it an opportunity for the symposium to highlight the good work of so-and-so?
Could be. That's in essence an award. It depends how you want to define award, you know.
right. So I think the question is, do we have something this year that is worthy of doing it, right? Of giving an award? Is that really kind of the question where everybody, so I really don't want to make a big deal out of this. I just want to
No,
get
Dick, listen,
everybody's.
I certainly, I'll speak for myself and for the board. What you've done with the symposium over the last couple of years with the various subcommittees that you've worked with, you've taken this symposium and really created a ticket-worthy event. People want to be there. We've grown. Look how we've grown from the Women's Club into the Convention Center. So I would, again, just maybe defer to your subcommittee to look about creating a criteria and maybe it not being a yearly event and not multiple awards. And I would just say, you know, keep in mind the Bank of America building. I mean, that they really made a misstep there. They just truly did. Some bank manager used it in her house and said, "Oh, gee, I love it. It'll be beautiful in the bank." And
Do we also feel with the designations that were given in a given year, if those should be recognized again?
I like that.
Even though, as Ken said, that we may have a occasion where the owner's like, wait a minute, I don't want to be recognized.
Well, maybe it's a slide presentation of these are the award, or these are the nominations that were made this year.
Board accomplishments.
Board accomplishments.
Yeah.
So maybe we could just do a visual, like
Just do
maybe
a
shoot
visual
something on
slide.
the screen, a couple of images.
Yeah.
And acknowledge it in that way.
Yeah.
Rather than having people come on stage and doing all
Yeah,
that.
no, just.
That's a great
This is
idea.
what we just nominated.
Yeah.
And that allows people to see just the
Yeah, I want
breadth
them
of
to
what
know
we do.
what we're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
let
think
them
that's
know.
part of
Yeah.
I like it.
education.
Yeah,
I agree, and I think that's perfect.
So maybe
Yeah.
that's where we put it.
yeah.
That's the subcommittee, we'll talk about that. If they're okay with that, then that sounds like
Yeah.
that's a good solution. That's a
And-
compromise.
Yes, and Ken, to your point, I can only think of one non-owner participation in a Class 1 nomination we've brought forward in the last 5 years or so. So it's not a most,
Right.
That's correct.
yeah, okay, but when we know who they are. But nonetheless, yeah, okay, so.
Okay.
I think that
you guys have
the direction that you guys are moving this in, I think makes sense.
Good.
No, that's excellent.
Okay,
Okay.
some more
No,
on the symposium?
No, everything else, we'll be having a subcommittee meeting soon.
Okay.
We're continuing in our path, everything is gelling nicely, so, yeah, that's our only thing.
Okay, thank you, Dick, and your subcommittee, Dan and Vincent. Discussion 5B, status Cornelia White residence. For those of us who got our little site visit yesterday, what a thrill.
Who was able to make it?
We made it.
Was it interesting?
Oh,
So you can give the report on this one because I was not able to make it.
all right. You
You've
know
actually
what?
seen it more recently than I have.
Bill, are you comfortable? Okay, good, yeah. No, because Bill educated me upon my leaving as to what I really did see. So, yeah, yes.
Seeing this building, I mean, I looked at this building for many years, but sort of really looking at it, it's an amazing building. To think that they took some railroad ties and globbed them together and built a building out of them, and how sophisticated that design is pretty amazing. And it's being held together by the grace of God and nothing else.
Air pressure.
It's probably the roof that's holding it together. What concerns me is whether this is preservation, restoration, or remodel. And I would like to be assured that whoever wrote the evaluation report is on site frequently to monitor the preservation and restoration of existing fabric, particularly when it's barely there anymore. And identifying those elements that are perhaps original as opposed to later additions, and that the original not be removed and conserved to the extent possible.
And I think that is the goal that we're working toward, but I know that there are areas, and you ask, what is the project? Is it a restoration? Is it a rehabilitation? Is it a remodel? I've used the term stabilization because it's quite a bit all of those. There's areas where we are able to preserve the original fabric, or materials. There's areas where some of the materials are so badly deteriorated that they're being removed, and you will see an effect or an effort to try to rough saw solid lumber to replace some of those railroad ties. It's going to be a hard one to match. So there's some where you're losing some of the fabric by the nature of how deteriorated it is, but those issues that are happening on the outside of it in terms of the ties and the other materials, the intent is to bring those back in the same kind of material or as close as we can. There are areas where the project is installing seismic shear walls that are going to, those seismic shear walls are basically being buried within the walls behind the facade, but in some cases that's going to be removing some of the structural, if we can call them that, members that are holding up some of those walls. My understanding is that there were places where we thought there were 2x4s. It turns out they're about like furring strips. And where you would think that they would be built on 16 inches on center, I guess they're about 4 feet or so on center. So to the extent possible, we're working very hard to get this building so that when it's all done, we have a building that will stand up. But there are parts of the building where the original fabric of the material has been lost or is going to need to be replaced. And the goal on those is to try to replace them with like materials as much as possible.
Ken, if you hold that thought there for a minute. Bill, hold that thought for just a second, please. I think that for me, I learned a lot after my review of the house yesterday when I spoke with Bill in the parking lot. I think both Dick and I took some really good photos, and I'd be happy to send those and share them with you so you have a little file, if you will. But I want to just notionally mention to the board that it was September of 2013 that Renee Brown sat in that chair and brought to the attention the dire straits of the Cornelia White House. So 5 years later, we were there yesterday seeing the stabilization project. So I think it's a win for us. I hope as a city-owned piece of property, that it took as long as it did, but it's underway and it'll be a better house for it. Okay, thank you. Yes?
And speaking to some of Member Lavoie's concerns, we've encountered a couple of areas where the question has come up, and the example that I'll use is apparently there were some outside light fixtures, floodlights of some type or an outside light fixture that was adjacent to one of those back doors. And the question came back to me, what do you want us to put in place? And they gave me a cut sheet of a lantern-like fixture. And the comment that I said was, it looks like the lighting that was there was done for security. This building was built in 1893 with an addition done in 1914. I presumed, the word is conjecture in historic preservation, that there probably wasn't a porch light there. And so when they asked me what should go back, I said nothing. Don't put anything back. And if you need security lighting on the back part of the building, we should put it via a pole or mount it on the back side of some of the other buildings that are not so sensitive. And it was following that particular decision that I asked for a subcommittee so that I can bounce these questions off some of you so that I'm not the Lone Ranger making these decisions that may be in error.
And remind us, who is that subcommittee helping you on that? Is it Bill? Bill, aren't you?
Yeah, it's Bill and,
I have a list of all the subcommittees, and off the top of my head
Right,
now,
but no, I think
don't know.
that-
There were 2 people, I think.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I think that's
just read it.
the right choice, because as you were telling the story, I was probably going to say they didn't have a light, they didn't have a porch light, right? So why put one? Yeah.
And it came, at that point, it was approaching the idea of becoming false historicism, and that was why I made that decision. But there may be other decisions that come along that
Sure.
are tougher.
Sure.
And I would appreciate, those are the ones that I will bring the board in on to seek an opinion as well. I know you had more you wanted to say, but.
Bill?
I guess the concern is to the ability in the future to differentiate between the original and the new.
Yeah. Which is a lot of why the documentation film that we're doing will help in that as well. Yeah.
Ken, on that topic, is the video in process? Is it getting documented?
Yes, there's a time-lapse camera that's mounted permanently at the site that's taking pictures of the site, I believe, every day.
Now, that's exterior, of course.
That's correct. And then when there's an event that happens, when there's a part of the building that's being opened up, the contractor contacts the filming crew gets out there the next day when they do it. So many of the situations when we're encountering that thing and we're going, oh no, or aha, or thank goodness, or whatever is the reaction when you open the wall up, we're trying to have the camera there in as many
All right,
of those as
excellent.
we can.
Okay. All right.
There'll
Dave?
also be, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a question of Ken. So from a timing standpoint, any idea as to that project, its completion? I know, in asking that to the contractor, he was scratching his head.
I don't.
And I have a
don't-
reason for asking.
Okay.
The reason
I
for
don't know
asking.
I don't know what the schedule is at this
The
time.
reason I'm asking is we had planned to have that as a segment at the annual event on the workshops with JR and Mr. Johnson doing a presentation showing the video. So just from a standpoint of our planning going forward, it would be helpful if there's enough in that, or, by April, or,
There will probably be some of the photos that you've taken, but the film won't be ready by then.
the film will not be ready by then. Oh, okay,
Maybe that's 2020.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't have that panel there to discuss the project and use photos and that kind of thing as your visual tools for it, if it's something that you feel is important to have this year.
An additional thought on that. When we toured it yesterday, what I saw was most of the floor is torn up. They're working on the foundation, the subfloor, that type of thing. Windows have been removed. The frames are stored in the house there. The windows are boarded up naturally. They haven't started opening the walls yet. So I think there should be another visit of the HSPB as a courtesy, 3 months to see what's behind the walls now. And the ceiling, it has that coffered ceiling in what is, I think, the living room. What's behind there? There's a lot to uncover still.
Yeah. And the intent, I don't believe, is not to rip out all the interiors. They're pulling out the interiors as they need to install the shear walls and get at those areas where there is either major deterioration or where they're finding there simply isn't any structure there, so.
Got it. All right.
Dan has.
Dan, I'm sorry.
No, I think you just answered my question. I was thinking, when we're putting all these tours together afterwards, is there anything to see there, or will there be this year, even if you can't get into the place?
Were you planning on doing a tour of Cornelia White?
No,
All the tours are like in process now. We just want to know if this would be a possibility or not.
I'd like to get back with you on that.
Okay.
I'd like to double check with the
Yeah.
contractor and see how optimistic he feels that that's a
Yeah.
date he can achieve.
I mean, even if it weren't finished, if we were going to do any presentation
Hard hat
at the
tour. Yeah,
symposium.
And
it
we're
could
just
be really,
asking
really
for planning
interesting.
purposes, because
Right.
JR has agreed to do it. But, if we don't think it's the right timing or what have you. So we can discuss that at the subcommittee level, but,
And I will ask the contractor what they believe is their best estimate on project
Okay.
completion.
Would
That'd be
there-
helpful.
Would
Okay.
there be any liability since it's under construction?
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and.
May have to
and
wait.
The contractor, while the project is a construction site, the contractor has control of the site. So we would honor their liability limitations in bringing the public on. I did ask them, in the case of the tour that I just set up for you yesterday, whether they were requiring waivers, and for that small group, they were not requiring it, but we would need to review it with them, because it would affect their their liability insurance.
All good?
Okay, that's it.
All good on Cornelia White? All right, thank you very much. 5C, Citywide Historic Resource Inventory Open House, Ken Lai-Yun.
Board, this event is the open house that we're having at the Convention Center next Monday. It's, December 17th from 5 to 7 at the Convention Center in Primrose Room C, I believe. And the purpose of the open house is to introduce the Citywide Historic Resources Survey to, basically the invitation has gone out to those property owners whose properties were listed, but it's obviously open to the public. Staff will be there. We will have copies of the Historic Resource Survey, of the list, of the materials that were in this so that the people can review it, ask questions, and so on. As I say, it will run from 5 to 7. Any of the board members who wish to come to that are encouraged and welcome to come to that. You don't have to come to it, but if your schedule's available and you want to do so, that would be great.
Dick?
I have two questions. One is, are there talking points that would be good for the board to, we could prepare like some sort of a list or something to be knowledgeable about, or maybe some of the questions that are going to come up from the audience or as they're mingling around. This could be sensitive. So I'm just wondering, you know, if there's anything that we can do. I think it's really going to be important for as many board members to come as possible.
Well, that, and there will be staff as well, and I've got to do some training for staff as well, so we'll all have some talking points that will be out there for us to reference. And if you have people that come up to you with a question that you are unsure of, don't hesitate to point them to me and say, go ask that guy.
Yeah, that's
And
what I wanted to know. How should we
hopefully have
handle
an
this?
answer for them as well.
Right, okay. And if you could just explain also to the board, in addition to the 356 that are on the HRG list, the other, there's a much larger segment also
Well,
that.
the list that you have that's on the city website is from 2015. So the list has been finalized. We're waiting for the final copies of it to come from HRG. The list includes those properties that were identified in the citywide survey as potentially eligible, as well as those parcels that are in the areas where they said there is a significant concentration of a certain type of resource, and these are the projects or the sites that are potentially contributing to those possible historic districts. Those are identified as well. So anytime that you look at the portion of the document that has the proposed historic districts, the ones that I believe they're green in those maps that are potentially contributing to that type of place would have also been identified. They would have also received mailings from the city on this list.
And by law, does there have to be a second open house, or is this the only one we have to have?
We don't have to have any. We're doing this as a means of educating and outreach.
Okay, I thought it might be an requirement.
We want the homeowners and the property owners whose properties are listed to be comfortable with understanding what this means and that there's not really a big issue about it. This will have to go to the city council. The city council wants to know that we've done adequate outreach to the properties who are on this list.
Right.
So they don't worry.
Okay.
That's basically the idea.
Good, so we don't necessarily have to do another one.
Yeah,
All right.
and we don't really know, I have no idea what kind of turnout we're going to have.
Right.
We have been getting some calls. The people that have called have been enthusiastic. They've been very positive. And the people are asking exactly the right questions. Like there was an individual who spoke with me late last week who said, we've done all this stuff. We've had this house. We've been very careful. We would really like to get it into a Class 1 designation. Does this thing help? And the answer was, of course it helps. This is the place where your research could start for the significance of your building. So it's been a good response overall from what we've heard from the public.
That's good.
But
Good.
they're
Mike?
not actually RSVPing to attend.
No, they're
So
not required to.
If you
no.
answer their question over the phone.
They may not show.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate the expediency of holding the meeting. Obviously, December 17th, the week prior to Christmas, was a
There is no ideal day or week this month.
Poorly timed,
It's just-
poorly timed. Because I would very much like to be there. I would very much like to be there, and on December 17th, I do have a conflict, so I certainly would encourage any other board members available to go, and hopefully you'll have a good turnout, or that we will
I think
have
it'll be a good
turnout.
event.
Good. All right. Anything else on the citywide historic resource inventory open house? Please?
Has the city council been invited? I can think of, has the city council been invited? I can think of 2 members who might benefit from learning a little bit more
Just
about the
2?
process.
Unless their homes or buildings were listed as potentially eligible, they were not invited, but they are, of course, always welcome to city events.
Perhaps they could be invited,
We can certainly do that.
all of them.
And I'd only make another suggestion that perhaps Amy Blaisdell do another email blast, Facebook posting about it, because I think the more people that we get to turn out, the better for all. Okay, 5D, status, Wellwood Murray Library Courtyard Restoration. Ken?
The project was reviewed by the AAC, as you know. The AAC made recommendations. Those recommendations were brought back to the designer. We had a meeting last week, I believe, with the Public Works project manager, the landscape designer, Jeannie Case from the library, and myself to give the designer a direction on the scope that was put together on this. And I saw an email this morning. I think the proposal has come back from the landscape architect for his fees for the additional work to do the revisions, and I have not seen much more than that. I was ripping through emails pretty fast this morning before I came to the meeting. So the project is moving into the direction of getting the drawings redone so we can get this matter to the board for its certificate of approval.
Any questions on that? Feedback? No? All right. Good. Ken, thank you very much for that. And 5E, Ordinance 8.05 revision recommendations. It was at the City Council the other night, and do you have some update for us on that?
Only that the City Council did approve it with some modifications. It will be going back for second reading, and then 30 days after the second reading, it goes into effect.
Okay.
So we're looking for this to they'll probably have a second reading at their next meeting, and then it would be 30 days after that.
Okay, Linda, hold that thought. Dick, you've been championing this from the beginning. We were all at the meeting the other night, and I will acknowledge this HSPB. Mr. Lavoie spoke, Mr. Hayes spoke, Mr. Burkett spoke, I myself spoke. So I think it was a very strong turnout from the HSPB in support of the ordinance. Dick, do you want to sort of recap your feelings on it, please?
I think that the presence of the board was very important. It was obvious from the council members
That we were there.
that we were there, and so noted, as were other members of the preservation community that were speaking. I was particularly pleased with that Mr. Franklin, the president of the Board of Realtors, was much more comfortable in the revisions. I think that was extremely positive, because we really do, I think it's really important for our board to continue to work in building good relationships with our community, and particularly with the real estate industry. I think it's extremely important, and that I would like to see us have, after this decision is made, assuming that it is a positive one, that we have some more meetings with the Board of Realtors so that everybody's comfortable and they understand, so that we're all working together, and so that, you know, we're very, very transparent, and that we are, because we've learned, we started last year with our workshop for the Board of Realtors in educating on particularly dispelling some of the myths that were out there. I know Todd was very involved with that on that panel. through CPF. And I think it's important, and it's a part of our outreach that's important for this board to do to the community. I mean, if there are myths, that's really kind of sad that they are allowed to continue to go on because there's so many positives. And I know I've created a document of my own of what I think are the positives that I will pass on to Ken as well to review. But, so I think and I thought it was interesting, the questions that were coming from council were the same questions that when we started out our subcommittee, that we were asking ourselves. And I can understand those questions. And they, so they were really quite to the point. And we sort of wrestled with each of those ourselves. So I think there's now an understanding by the council and the Board of Realtors as to what this is all about. So I'm feeling very positive from that standpoint. It was a very meaningful program, and I'm just eager for the last part of it.
All right, Dick, thank you very much for Linda.
What were some of the changes?
Can you characterize those a bit, because I was not at the meeting?
No, I can't. I would have to really sit back and really think about it for a minute. Okay, one thing I do recall is that instead of a rolling 35-year date of significance, it is now set at 1980.
Correct.
Arbitrarily, they chose 1980. But what I would remind this board is that when we all took seats at this board, it was 1945. It was 1945, and under our former planning director, Margot Wheeler, we moved it from a 1949 to a 1969. And that's well within the last 5 years. And now the council determined that a 35 rolling year wasn't just right, and so they determined a 1980. Dick, wasn't that the year, 1980?
Yep.
Yeah. And so that was one that I remember, Linda, as standing out.
I can pull together the summary once I've got a
please.
chance to look at it. And
Yeah.
There'll be
Yeah.
action summaries from the council's meetings, and I can pull those together and
do
send
you
them to you
recall?
as email.
Dick, Bill?
There was a lot of discussion about penalties
Oh, yes.
and whether putting someone in jail was onerous. Councilman Coors reminded them that people get put in jails for violations of the rental ordinance.
Yes.
Right. So they were gonna, I guess, sit down with the city attorney and hash that one out among
Yes.
themselves.
Well, I think, and again, Linda, I think Dick brought it up, and maybe another board member, is when the council was questioning a $1,000 fine and a $5,000 fine, the argument really was, this is not punitive enough. It wasn't punitive enough. Somebody tearing down a $1 million, $1,500,000 house is going to wrap $5,000 into kitchen faucets, and it's not going to be an issue at all. So it needed that threat. It needed that threat of imprisonment. And as much as the council tripped over it, it was Councilmember Coors who said, we have that language in our vacation rental ordinance. And so why wouldn't it apply here too? So I think that's going to stay
Yes.
within, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was really great that actually JR brought up, there was a lot of discussion, and ultimately the bulk of it was kept, even through the disagreements. But one of the things that JR had brought up is there was a lot of discussion about the 3-year scorched earth part of it, that they did agree to maintain. And the one thing that JR did add, and I'm very happy that he did, is that that's going to run with the land, which
Yes.
we didn't have in the ordinance. So there was essentially going to be almost a loophole that if somebody did something and it forced them to not be able to get a permit on that parcel for 3 years, they effectively may have been able to sell it to somebody else, and that other person may have been able to build on it. Well, that's not going to be the case now. So that that,
Yeah, no, that was excellent.
That 3-year period is going to run with the land, which is great. So, and that was JR, I think, was the one responsible for adding that.
You know, if I'm recalling, there was a, and I mean this affectionately, a funny little old man in the audience. But do you remember him?
Yeah.
He was sitting in front of us, and he was a planning director from another city in another part of the country. And he was there for the scooters or something, but then he spoke. He was there for pickleball. He was there for pickleball, and he got up and he said, you know, I had no intentions of speaking on this issue, but I do have some experience about this. And I think it was his suggestion that this scorched earth thing run with the land, not with the ownership. And then JR picked up on that. But yeah, no, who was that little guy?
I think he was a former
He was
city
very
attorney.
knowledgeable.
He was,
Oh, that was it.
He was a former city attorney.
Former city attorney.
He was
For
great.
Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one other question. I've been getting a lot of questions from people. Is there going to be a Class 3 and a Class 3A? There's a great deal of confusion on this.
Yeah.
So there seemed to be, my understanding of where they left it was that they want to maybe have 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 3A and 3B. And so that was sort of, I mean, the way I understood it was going to come back to the subcommittee. But,
Yeah,
I don't
Flynn,
know.
yeah, no, Flynn did have some important feedback on class 1, 2, 3, 3A, or 4, but I'm not remembering exactly how that,
so that didn't get resolved.
Right.
Well, that's what I took away from it. I was just trying to figure out if I
That was
missed something.
my takeaway.
Yeah.
They did not resolve that, but that was one of the items that they wanted the subcommittee to address and bring back to the board is answering, and that was a clarity, a lot of, and then one of the other things was clarity of language, and I can't remember what it was. I don't know, Bill, if you can remember.
There seemed to be a considerable amount of confusion about the "and," that it is a certain age and on the survey, as opposed to just a certain age. So my understanding is it's a class 3 if it is of a certain age and on the survey. I may be wrong, but that was my understanding with the last set of revisions from JR.
And I'll have to watch it and look at the
That
actual
would-
summary
would
to see,
have been
because I
at our
know there
last
was a discussion
subcommittee.
between, here is all the class 3, here are the ones that are that are eligible, these are the ones that are subject to potential HSPB review. That's as I understood it.
And it was a discussion at our last committee meeting.
Thank you.
anything else on revisions to the 8.05? Okay, seeing none, that completes our discussion items. Board member comments, please. Linda?
Thank you so much for your service. You've done an outstanding job. We will miss you. I will miss you terribly. I'm sorry to see you go.
You live old enough, you term out. That's all I can tell you. That's all I can tell you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
I'll third it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would add,
Please.
I learned how to be an advocate for the applicant as well as preservation from you. And that has been a very valuable lesson. Thank you.
Wow. Anybody else? You know, I absolutely do not want to get emotional about this, but I really don't. But this has been an honor. It has been an honor. I joined this board as a member, then became the co-chair, and then became the chair. Looking back over the last 5.5 years, this board accomplished amazing things. Amazing things. This board, you know, success has many fathers, and a failure is an orphan. And the success of Tahquitz Plaza, particularly, was accomplished by this board. saving the Cody gas station on the north end of town. You know how cantankerous the gentleman was in comparing the Egyptian pyramids to, our Cody gas station from 1962. Many, many things. The restoration, adaptive reuse of the Robinsons building. And interesting that it was Jim Chiaffi that was back here today. We allowed for some significant alterations to that building to allow for its adaptive reuse. So I think that we did some great things, and it does take a village, and I think that we can all be very, very proud of what we accomplished over the last 5.5 years. Now, I do have some closing arguments, things, and Ken, I appreciate so much that today on the Oasis building, you conditioned the removal of built improvements, because we brought that up with Giro Giro, and we're stuck with it, and now the new restaurateur is making it work. But I think that our Class 1 buildings, we have to be vigilant and protect them as best we can. So I very much appreciate you putting in the removal of the built elements from Class 1 properties should the tenancy change. In the October and/or November minutes that we just reviewed here today, there was the conversation about the west facade of the Palm Springs International Airport. I went back through the 5 years. It has come up numerous times, and in the most recent meetings, Mr. Nolan acknowledged that, yes, that was a part of the plan there. What they're doing currently under this project is interior improvements. But please, board, keep in mind that when you see the airport again, and Mr. Nolan noted that they will be back in the not-too-distant future for the baggage handling and that type of thing, those changes will affect the exterior, and that's when we will get those columns restored. So I task you with that. I've already mentioned the Bank of America building. I want to come back to the Calle Marcus house that we saw in November, Laforte and Julian. And in reviewing the minutes to the meeting and my own personal consciousness, in the minutes I asked staff, has the HSP ever denied a Class 1 historic nomination based on the color of the property? And the answer was no. I feel we did something, I think we did something wrong. I supported Mr. Hayes in his motion, and in the car on the way home as I was leaving here, I felt I had made the wrong decision. I respect Member Burkett for being the sole no vote. I do not believe we should have denied that property based on it being a white house with an orange door. I would ask that going forward, as you look at Class 1 historic sites, that the color not be a denying factor of the nomination. We are acknowledging ourselves today for a 5-year program to get the Cornelia White House under restoration or under stabilization. That is a big win for this board, and I mentioned it again in November. I'm going to mention it again today. This board needs to turn their attention to La Plaza Theater. It is a property owned by the city of Palm Springs. The interior and exterior falls within the review of this board. Councilmember Roberts was here and said that he would be forming a steering committee. And I ask that you please keep this on your front plate, on the front burner. Develop that steering committee. If we have to hold a car wash or a bake sale to raise the money to get this building restored, it's what we have to do. It's too important to just further down the road another 30 days and another 30 days. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. We accomplished it on Cornelia White. I hope it's not a 5-year project. I really hope it's not. So I task you with that. In the October or the November meeting, because city council members have changed since the HSPB wrote the first letter to the mayor about the naming of the downtown park for Nellie Kaufman and the inclusion of historical elements in that downtown park, I again task this board with carrying that water. It is a city park. It is a designated Class 2 property as it sits there, and it is well within the purview of this board to move that forward. The naming of the park, the inclusion of a historical element, and so I would really like to, and what I'll say is, I love that the meetings are now televised, because I'll be watching in January and February and March, because I don't think I'm going to change my calendar. I'm going to leave my Tuesdays devoted to the HSPB, but I'll be watching at home as opposed to from in here. So just, you know. Well, make sure your phones are off. That's all I can tell you. Make sure your phones are off. Oh, and then I also wanted to just mention at the city council meeting the other night, again, Dick, to your credit, you have been the on-site police officer at the, or concerned citizen at the Orchid Tree Inn, bringing to code enforcement repeatedly signs of an intrusion in the fence and a broken door and access into the property. Mr. Weintraub was at City Council the other night. That's the owner of the Orchid Tree Inn. And in exchange for his 1-year extension, he is being tasked with creating security similar to what we imposed on Town and Country. Thank you. So you keep our eyes on that. You know, we are, Ken has always said, see something, say something, and for all of us, no matter what part of town you're in, if you see something, certainly code enforcement is such an easy thing to do. I used to think it was a daunting thing, and it is not, and it is a very easy thing to do. Alert code enforcement of a broken window or because the Orchid Tree Inn, of course, we know how important it is, and we want to encourage Mr. Weintraub, and he stepped up the other night and he said he would do everything that the city was requiring him relative to securing it and lighting it and cameras and all those many things. So, I mean, I think that's everything I wanted to say. And again, I'll just say it has been an honor for me to sit here on Tuesday mornings with all of you and conduct the business of preservation in our city. Thank you. Oh, Todd, I thought that was...
Oh, sorry. I had a couple of other things to add. Well, so just to address the nomination before us last month, I absolutely did not vote in opposition to that solely based on the color. That was one of a number of issues that I had with the nomination, that it was just one of a number of things. Right. So the color was one of them, but that was not the only reason. But I do still believe that color should be something that should be thought about. To that end, I brought us some homework. So there's been part of my you know, in thinking about that and other things, I think a lot of what's going to happen before us, and maybe not us, but future boards, is the more Class 1 houses and properties and sites get designated, it's going to be naturally harder and harder to decide which ones to designate. I think the first 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 were obvious. They were brainers. When you go through the list and look at the early ones, it's obvious that those are significant structures, and they almost could have come before us and said, hi, this is so-and-so, you need to designate this, and do nothing, and it would have been obvious. As we go through the city and more sites are designated, it's, I think, going to be natural that the subsequent ones that come before this board in future years will take more time and more thought to decide whether or not they rise to the merit of being a Class 1 structure, which is why I also like the idea that we're going to have a Class 2, and we're going to have some other option as to, you know, not just yes or no. Okay, it may not be a 1, but it is a 2. And so I think, you know, to that end, that's just food for thought. And also, we've done a lot of work, and so in the city of Pasadena, what I just passed out is the first few pages of a 190-page document. I did not give you all 190 pages. But the reason why I wanted to give this to you is we've talked a lot about guidelines. Flynn actually mentioned guidelines in the council meeting last Wednesday, that if we get districts and things like that, and we have people that come like, hey, I am now in an historic district, what do I do? You may in one fell swoop have 100 people or 100 owners that need to be cognizant of what they can and can't do to their house. And so the city of Pasadena, and I think what's important is on the second page, you see that there was a village that created this document. This was not just the city, it was not just Ken. Ken's like, you're right. But there were there were monies that were there were people that were paid to create this document. But what it is there's a really great document that the city of Pasadena has, that if people live in an historic site or in an historic district, they can go to this. Frankly, this is all available online. I would maybe consider and encourage the city finding a way to create such a document that might make your job easier, that might make future boards' jobs easier. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there.
And this was funded by a grant?
Yeah, so.
I think that's very important.
So anyway, it's just sort of food for thought, and it is available online. So if you want to look at all 190 pages of it, just Google it, and you can download the PDF. So anyway, and that's it. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
To Mr. Hayes's point, Santa Barbara has similar guidelines, and they were funded as part of the budget.
As part of the budget.
As part of the planning budget, both the creation of and constant updating. So Santa Barbara has, several documents. And the most important one we're finding right now is the necessity of review boards to make neighborhood compatibility findings. So we have a document that tells us what is compatible with a neighborhood and how to assess it. And the document I gave Gary is a cultural landscape study, which is not about landscape, but an historian's evaluation and story of how a neighborhood develops and how it changes, and that informs how it can continue to change and not be a radical departure. So all of a sudden, a McMansion shows up in a bungalow neighborhood, and it prevents that thing from happening. And I think Palm Springs has been very fortunate, and then that hasn't happened quite yet, except in the commercial district. But our neighborhoods are more or less intact, and now is the time to start talking about neighborhood compatibility.
Yeah, 100%. Dick?
I'd like to recommend what Todd and Bill just talked about for us to consider as a board going forward. that maybe we could have, separate from a regular meeting, we could have a study session, if you will, on these guidelines, because I think they are important, that potential properties of potential designations should be well-informed of what it's about, and that we do have guidelines that are published. So maybe we could do a two-step process. We could have an initial meeting, maybe a study session, and then following that, or at that meeting, maybe designated a subcommittee to get into some more nitty-gritties and talk about the funding and how we could create this kind of a document. Because I think what's really interesting is, and what's happened is, Gary, and under your watch, we planted the seed for, I think, being a little more vigilant, and as a board in designations and how we do things, and some of the loopholes that have existed back with the demolition thing. All of that plays into it. So maybe we could. Maybe that would be a good idea. We could talk about at the January meeting about doing that kind of a thing with a work session.
Ken,
Just
please.
in terms of this kind of initiative, it's a perfect example of the type of thing that you might want to consider for a CLG grant, the Certified Local Government Grant.
Yeah.
We did apply this year for the very first time for a grant. We were not awarded one, but we were told that our grant submission was well done. But there were others that were very compelling that they did choose to award instead. However, it's the kind of thing that those kinds of awards and grants are good for, because they're somewhat limited in their dollar value, but enough to do something of the lines of what Mr. Burkett's talking about.
Mr. Chair?
Please, Linda.
I think that's a great idea, and a lot of times, first-time grant applications are not accepted. They want to see how serious you are. I think that when I brought this up at the last meeting about do we have guidelines to give to people, I think this is something we really, really need to focus on this next year. And I would like us to, I would like, if you could see if we could move forward with grant funding right away, as soon as possible, and then do our subcommittee.
Yeah.
Just so we can get the funding in place, because this is a big document. And I think neighborhood compatibility has to be added to that.
Agreed, 100%.
Yep.
Any more board member comments?
Mr. Chair, one other.
Please?
While I was at the Cornelia White waiting for the contractor to show up, I was looking at the McCallum Adobe. It is the next candidate for an evaluation of the negative impacts of more recent additions. Particularly the sidewalk is deteriorating the foundation adobe blocks, and how the more recent wood frame additions are glued onto the adobe, and it's having a bad effect on the adobe.
Ken, might I ask that based on what Mr. Lavoie's observation was, that maybe there's a discussion item in the January meeting about it, so you actually get a discussion about it? And thank you. It's about observing. It's really about keeping our eyes and ears open. Vincent.
Mr. Chair, I just want to commend you for your ease and your grace and your ability to run a meeting effectively. I've been incredibly impressed with your chairmanship as a new member of the board in terms of how you deal with the public and how you deal with the board itself and how you deal with the city fathers or mothers, so to speak. I'm just very, very impressed with your ability to run a meeting and do it well. And
Vincent,
we'll miss you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeez. Thank you. Anybody else? Board member comments?
I have one last thing.
Please, yep, no, because then
The
Ken's up next.
Status for the Steve McQueen House,
Oh, yeah.
any update on?
Steve McQueen is ready to get prepared to go to city council. So it's a matter of me having some time. There's a couple of them when we have the public applications that are coming through, like Casa Adair and others. We usually take those first before the ones that the board has initiated. So it's in the hopper. We should be getting it to the city council probably in early 2019.
So
but I
why
don't have
would-
a specific date yet.
So why would outside applications take precedence over the board initiatives?
We're generally trying to work toward a public service sort of goal. There's no magic to it.
Okay.
It tends to be the ones that I grab because I've got those there and I've
Understood,
got to push them,
understood.
so.
I was just gonna give
But
you a
there is
hard
no
time.
real, there is no real priority one way or the other.
Because that one's been out there now for a while.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
We were waiting for quite a while for some things from the applicant, just identifying the work that they were doing and how it relates to the Secretary of the Interior standards. It took us some time to get that from the applicant. They were a little unclear how to do it. So with a little bit of prompting, we finally got a document that fits together well enough that we can take it forward.
Excellent, excellent.
But weren't there some questions that we had as a board after we went through the process with without being able to see actually what happened with?
You were having questions, I believe, around work that was being done. When you saw the house, you saw things, I think, already rather torn apart. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So the work that they're describing has the material that they've talked about described
Right.
and how it relates to the Secretary of the Interior standards. So if there was a railing, probably the railing is the most, it's that aspect of the house that had to be changed the most to meet the current codes. So that's been documented in terms of what was the original, what the codes were requiring it to be changed to, and the source or the change that was made was done to be as minimal as possible, but it's identifiable that it's not part of the original home. So you understand when you look at that building that the railing with the additional barriers, I'll say, the pickets or the railings, whatever, it meets the current code for the opening, it had to be done afterwards. So those are things that you'll see that'll be documented in that resolution as being non-contributing. So the additional work that had to be put in for code becomes non-contributing. But the original railing and its configuration was simply the clear top rail and the middle rail is what the original condition was. So those are the kinds of, that's probably the most notable example of where there was something that had to be changed significantly from what was there.
Right. Todd and Bill, I believe you denied, or you voted no for a Class 1 on that property because you had seen it in such a state of undoing that you wanted to see what the finished product was before you would agree. So can you remember? Yeah.
I mean, it was sort of like, what are we designating? There's nothing there.
Right. The open framework and
Yeah.
what have you. All right. Yeah. So will that nomination, it's passed this board with a some in favor and some against, but it's never coming back here again. It's now out there and on there.
To say it never comes back, it doesn't come back in terms of the Class 1 nomination.
Right.
Future alterations would come back to you if
Okay.
it gets designated.
All right, good. Any other board comments? Staff comments?
Well, I'll throw another log on the Gary Johns compliment pile. Very well deserved. For staff, when we work with a board or commission, our primary liaison is with the board chair. Now, we work, of course, with all of you, but the essence of what this board does is not just working toward preservation. And you said it very clearly. It's how do you help an applicant toward an approvable project? So that you're not simply saying no, but you're saying, I could approve this if you can move a little closer to this kind of condition. That's the benefit that a chair brings to push this conversation in a direction. And I want to compliment you on that, as well as being a very well-run meeting and someone with whom I've had a good, enjoyable working relationship with. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And stay connected.
Oh, I will. I'm telling you, I'm watching. I'll be watching from home.
That's all I have.
That's it on your staff comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then, ladies and gentlemen, the Historic Site Preservation Board will adjourn to its regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday, January 8th at 9 a.m. And again, thank you all very, very much. Thank you.